The rope burned against Mei Lin's wrists as three men dragged her toward the church. Blood trickled from her split lip, staining her torn silk collar. The entire town had gathered, women clutching their children, men with hard eyes and harder fists. Sheriff Morton stood on the church steps, his hand resting on his gun belt, his face carved from stone and prejudice. "You don't belong here," he said quietly. Never did. Mei Lin lifted her chin, meeting his gaze through swollen eyes. In that moment, she made a choice that would change everything. Not submission, but defiance. This is her story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside Red Pine Crossing just as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. Dust hung in the air like a dirty curtain, and through it, Mei Lin could see the town, if you could call it that. A dozen buildings clustered around a muddy main street, their weathered wood the color of old bones. The mountains loomed behind everything, dark and permanent, watching. Mei Lin stepped down carefully, her embroidered shoes immediately sinking into the mud. The driver didn't offer his hand. He just tossed her single trunk down, nearly hitting her, then climbed back up without a word. The stagecoach pulled away before she could even thank him, leaving her standing alone in the center of town with mud soaking through her stockings. The stairs started immediately. A woman sweeping her porch stopped mid-stroke, her mouth falling open. Two men outside the general store went silent, their eyes tracking Mei Lin's every movement. A child pointed, and his mother jerked his hand down, pulling him close as if Mei Lin carried some contagion. Mei Lin had expected this. She'd prepared herself during the 3-week journey from San Francisco, rehearsing indifference like lines from a play. But preparation and reality were different things. The weight of their stares felt physical, pressing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. She picked up her trunk, lighter than it should be, containing everything she had left in the world, and started walking toward the address her uncle had sent. The letter had been brief, almost cold, but it had contained an invitation. "Come to Red Pine Crossing. There is work here. You can start again." Starting again. That's what people said when they meant running away. Her uncle's shop sat at the end of the street, a narrow building wedged between a saloon and a boarding house. The sign above the door read Chen's General Goods in faded paint. Through the window, Mei Lin could see shelves stocked with fabric, tools, canned goods, the essentials of frontier life, organized with the precision she remembered from her uncle's shop in San Francisco before everything fell apart. She pushed open the door. A bell chimed, too cheerful for the moment. Her uncle stood behind the counter, older than she remembered, his face carved into deeper lines. He looked up at the sound of the bell, and for just a second, something flickered in his eyes, recognition, maybe even warmth. But it died quickly, replaced by something harder. "Mei Lin." He didn't move from behind the counter, didn't smile. "Uncle Chen." She bowed slightly, the gesture automatic despite the years away. "Thank you for allowing me to come." He glanced past her, toward the window, toward the town watching beyond it. His jaw tightened. "Put your trunk in the back room, then we talk." The back room was small and dark, smelling of dust and old wood. Mei Lin set her trunk down carefully and returned to the front. Her uncle had moved to the window, standing with his back to her, his hands clasped behind him. "You cannot stay here," he said without turning around. The words hit her like a slap. "What? I made a mistake inviting you. I thought—" He turned then, and she saw something in his face she hadn't expected. Fear? This town is not San Francisco. These people, they do not understand our ways. They see you and they see— He gestured vaguely. "They see something foreign, something to be suspicious of. You said there was work." "There was. Before you arrived. Before they saw you." He moved back to the counter, straightening items that didn't need straightening. "Mrs. Patterson came by this morning. She told me in clear terms that if I employ you, if you are seen working in my shop, she will organize the other women. They will stop shopping here. They will destroy my business." Mei Lin felt something cold spreading through her chest. "So you're sending me away? I am protecting what I have built." His voice sharpened, defensive. "You think I am cruel? I spent 15 years building this shop, earning their trust. They tolerate me because I am useful, because I keep to myself, because I do not make waves. But you, He shook his head. You are young. You are beautiful. You walk into this town dressed like a merchant's daughter, carrying yourself like someone who expects respect. They will never accept that. Where am I supposed to go? There is a Chinese camp 2 days east. Mining work. They will take you in. I'm not a miner, uncle. Then learn. He pulled out a small cloth purse from beneath the counter and set it down with a dull clink. This is all I can give you. Enough for supplies and passage. I am sorry, Maylin, truly, but you cannot stay. She looked at the purse, at the coins visible through the worn fabric. Charity, dismissal. The end of the last thread connecting her to family. I understand, she said quietly, though she didn't. She picked up the purse and turned toward the back room to collect her trunk. Maylin. Her uncle's voice stopped her. When she looked back, his expression had softened slightly, just enough to show the man she remembered from childhood. In this world, we survive by knowing our place. The sooner you accept yours, the easier your life will be. She didn't answer. There was nothing to say. The boarding house owner, a thick woman with flour-dusted hands and a perpetual scowl, agreed to rent Maylin a room for 1 week. Payment in advance, she said, not meeting Maylin's eyes. No visitors, no noise. You stay in your room after dark. The room was barely larger than a closet, with a sagging bed, a cracked wash basin, and a window that looked out onto the alley where men pissed after drinking. But it was shelter, and for now, that had to be enough. Maylin sat on the bed and counted her remaining money. With the room paid, she had enough for maybe 10 days of basic food. After that, nothing. She lay back, staring at the water-stained ceiling. In San Francisco, she'd had a house with servants. She'd worn silk every day, attended parties where men competed for her attention, lived the life her father's business success had bought. Then the fire came. The business burned. Her father died trying to save the ledgers. Her mother lasted 3 months before grief took her too. The relatives who'd smiled at those parties suddenly had no room for her. Friends discovered previous engagements. The house was sold to pay debts, the servants dismissed, the silk dresses sold one by one until only her current dress remained. The one she'd been wearing the day everything ended, now patched and restitched so many times it barely held together. She'd written to her uncle because he was the only family left who might answer, and he had answered briefly, offering this. Come to Red Pine Crossing. Now here she was. Nowhere else to go. No one left to help. The next 3 days followed the same pattern. Maylin woke early, washed with cold water, and went looking for work. She tried every business in town. The restaurant owner took one look at her and said, I don't serve Chinese food. I can cook anything, Maylin replied. American food, whatever you need. Not interested. The laundrywoman was more direct. You think I'm letting someone who looks like you near my customers' clothes? They'd burn the shop down. The blacksmith didn't even let her finish speaking. No. Each rejection felt like a small death, but Maylin kept trying, kept asking, because the alternative was giving up, and she wasn't ready for that yet. On the 4th day, she noticed the men watching her differently. Not with suspicion now, but with something worse, speculation. They looked at her the way men looked at horses they were considering buying, assessing value, imagining use. That night, someone knocked on her door after dark. Maylin froze, her heart hammering. The boarding house owner had been clear. No visitors. The knock came again, harder. Who is it? She called. Open the door. A man's voice, rough with drink. I'm not receiving visitors. A pause. Then laughter, low and mean. I ain't asking, darling. The door handle rattled. Maylin grabbed the wash basin, the only heavy object in the room, and held it ready, her hands shaking. The rattling stopped. Footsteps retreated down the hall. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the boarding house owner caught her on the stairs. You're causing problems. Someone tried to enter my room. I didn't invite them. Doesn't matter, you're the problem. The woman crossed her arms. Men are fighting over you at the saloon. Wives are complaining. The sheriff's been here twice asking questions. She shook her head. You got 3 days left on your week? Don't expect me to extend it. Maylin felt the walls closing in. 3 days. Then the street. Then what? She spent that afternoon sitting by the window in her room, watching the town move through its rhythms. The stagecoach arrived and departed. Women shopped, their baskets filling with goods her uncle sold them. Men worked, drank, argued, worked again. Life continued, indifferent to her desperation. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains gold and purple, Maylene made a decision. If no one would give her a chance, she would create her own. She'd heard the men talking at the general store about the supply runs. Once a month, someone made the dangerous trek up into the mountains to deliver goods to the logging camps and isolated homesteaders. The pay was good because the work was brutal. 3 days of hard riding through rough country where bears outnumbered people and one wrong turn could mean death. The current runner had quit after his horse broke its leg in a ravine, leaving him to walk 15 miles back to town. No one had volunteered to replace him. Until now. The next morning, Maylin walked into the general store and found her uncle sorting through invoices. "I want to make the supply run," she said without preamble. He looked up slowly, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "What?" "The mountain run. I can do it." "Maylin, you have never ridden a horse." "I can learn. The trail is dangerous. Men have died on that route." "Then I'll be careful." Her uncle set down the invoices and studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him pause. "Why?" "Because I need money. Because no one else will hire me. Because I have no other options." She met his eyes. "Unless you've changed your mind about letting me work here?" He looked away. That was answer enough. "The pay is $15, he said after a long moment, "for 3 days of riding and delivering to 5 locations. You need your own horse, your own supplies. The route is marked but easy to lose if you don't pay attention. The last 2 runners quit because they were too scared to continue." "I'm not scared." "You should be." "Maybe." But fear was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. Her uncle opened a drawer and pulled out a crude map, spreading it on the counter. "These are the stops. You follow Copper Creek up into the high country. First stop is the Henderson logging camp, about 6 hours north. Then the Willis homestead, another 4 hours past that. After that, it gets harder. You're up in real mountain territory. The McGraw brothers have a claim near Eagle Pass. Then there's a trapper named Cole who lives alone about 2 hours further in. Last stop is the Sullivan family, if they're still up there. They move around." Maylin studied the map, memorizing the markings. "When do I start?" "The supplies are ready now. You could leave tomorrow if you had a horse." He paused. "I have an old mare in the stable behind the shop. She's not worth much, but she knows the trail. I'll loan her to you. Comes out of your pay." "How much?" $5. $10 for 3 days of dangerous work. It wasn't enough, but it was something. "I'll take it." Her uncle nodded slowly, then pulled out a bill of lading and began filling in her name. "Don't make me regret this." Maylin spent the rest of the day preparing. She bought basic supplies with the last of her money: jerky, hardtack, a canteen, matches. The stable master, a grizzled old man missing 2 fingers, helped her learn the basics of saddling and riding. "You ever been on a horse before?" he asked, watching her struggle with the stirrups. "No." He spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Well, you're about to learn real quick. Daisy here's steady, but she's stubborn. Don't let her stop to eat every 5 minutes, or you'll never make your stops on time." Daisy was a gray mare with 1 white sock and a skeptical expression. She tolerated Maylin's fumbling attempts to mount, then stood perfectly still, as if waiting to see if this fool human would actually go through with this plan. Maylin spent 2 hours riding in circles around the paddock, learning how to sit, how to hold the reins, how to make Daisy do what she wanted instead of what the horse preferred. Her thighs ached, her back screamed, her hands blistered. The stable master watched, shaking his head. "You're going to die up there." "Probably not." "Definitely yes." That evening, Maylin packed the supplies into Daisy's saddlebags: canned goods, tobacco, ammunition, salt, sugar, coffee. The weight made the horse sink slightly, her ears flicking back in annoyance. "I know," Maylin murmured, adjusting the straps. "I'm not happy about this either." At dawn, the town was still mostly asleep. Maylin led Daisy through the empty streets, her breath fogging in the cold mountain air. The supplies shifted and creaked with each step. Her uncle was waiting outside his shop, holding a rifle. "You know how to shoot?" he asked. "No." He sighed and showed her the basics: how to load, how to aim, how to work the lever action. Bears mostly leave you alone if you make noise. Mountain lions are worse. They're quiet and smart. But the real danger is men. Some of those homesteaders haven't seen another person in months. They get strange. Keep this loaded and keep it close. He handed her the rifle and a box of ammunition. Thank you, Uncle. He just nodded, his face unreadable. Come back alive. Bad for business if my runner dies on the first trip. Maylin mounted Daisy, less gracefully than she would have liked, but without falling off, and turned the horse north toward the mountains. The trail started easy, following Copper Creek through valley meadows where morning mist clung to the grass. Birds sang. The sun climbed, burning off the fog, revealing the massive peaks ahead. Then the trail turned upward. Daisy picked her way over rocks and roots, her breathing growing heavier as the grade steepened. Maylin's inexperience showed in every movement. She bounced when she should have moved with the horse, pulled on the reins when she should have relaxed, tensed up when she needed to stay loose. By midday, every muscle in her body hurt. The forest closed in around the trail, pine and aspen so thick the sunlight came through in scattered coins. The temperature dropped. Maylin's thin jacket did almost nothing against the mountain cold. She passed a marker her uncle had described, a lightning-split pine tree with a white X carved into the trunk. The Henderson logging camp should be 2 hours ahead. 1 hour later, she heard the axes. The sound echoed through the trees, rhythmic and purposeful. Then voices, rough and loud. Maylin rounded a bend and saw the camp. A cluster of rough shelters, a massive pile of stripped logs, and a dozen men covered in sawdust and sweat. They stopped working when they saw her. A large man with a red beard stepped forward, wiping his hands on his pants. Well, hell, where's Jackson? He quit. I'm the new runner. Redbeard looked her up and down, his expression cycling through surprise, amusement, and something darker. Chen send you? Yes. Huh. He turned and called over his shoulder. Boys, our supplies came wrapped in silk this month. Laughter rippled through the camp. Maylin kept her face neutral, her hands steady on the reins. Redbeard approached, his eyes never leaving her face. You got our tobacco? And everything else on the order. Maylin dismounted, more of a controlled fall, and began unloading supplies. Her hands shook slightly, but she kept working, checking items off against the bill of lading her uncle had provided. The men gathered around, watching. Their stares felt different from the town, less hostile but more predatory, like wolves deciding if something was prey or too much trouble. How much we owe? Redbeard asked. Maylin checked the paper. $14. He counted out coins and pressed them into her palm, his hand lingering a moment too long. You coming back next month? If I survive this month. That got a real laugh. Redbeard stepped back, his expression shifting to something almost respectful. You got guts, I'll give you that. Trail gets worse from here. Willis Place is about 4 hours up. Watch for the turnoff at Broken Creek. Easy to miss. Thank you. She remounted Daisy and turned back to the trail, feeling their eyes on her back until the forest swallowed her again. The afternoon wore on. The trail grew steeper, narrower. In places it ran along cliff sides where one misstep would send horse and rider tumbling hundreds of feet. Maylin's fear was a constant companion now, a cold weight in her stomach. But she didn't turn back. The Willis homestead appeared just as the sun touched the western peaks. It was a sad collection of buildings, a leaning cabin, a sagging barn, a vegetable garden fighting a losing battle against the weeds. An old woman emerged as Maylin approached, a shotgun cradled in her arms. State your business. Supplies from Chen's general store. The woman squinted, then lowered the gun slightly. You're not Jackson. Jackson quit. I'm Maylin. You're a woman. Yes. Chinese. Yes. The old woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Well, I don't give a damn what you are long as you brought my coffee. My husband's laid up with a broke leg, and he's been meaner than a snake without his morning brew. Maylin unloaded the supplies, her body moving on pure will now, past the pain. Mrs. Willis counted out payment, then surprised her by adding an extra $1. What's this for? Making it this far, most men would have quit by now. She glanced at the darkening sky. You planning to ride on tonight? I need to reach the next stop. McGraw Brothers? Mrs. Willis shook her head. You'll never make it before full dark. And that trail ain't safe in darkness. You can camp in my barn if you want. Maylin hesitated. She was exhausted, sore, half frozen. But accepting hospitality meant owing debt, meant vulnerability. I'll pay for the space. Keep your money. Just don't steal nothing and don't bother my chickens. The barn was warmer than Maylin expected, insulated by hay and the body heat of 2 cows and a goat. She unsaddled Daisy, rubbed the horse down with shaking hands, then collapsed into the hay. She meant to eat something. She meant to check her supplies, plan tomorrow's route. Instead, she fell asleep still wearing her boots, her body finally overriding her mind's protests. She woke to darkness and the sound of voices. Maylin sat up slowly, her hand finding the rifle her uncle had given her. Through the barn wall cracks, she could see lamplight from the cabin. Can't just send her up there alone, Mrs. Willis's voice sharp with concern. A man's voice answered, rough with pain and whiskey. Not our problem, woman. She's barely more than a girl. She knew what she was signing up for. Did she? You really think Chen told her about Cole? A long silence. Then the man again, quieter. Maybe Cole's moved on. You know he hasn't. He's still up there. And when he sees her, Mrs. Willis's voice dropped too low to hear clearly. Maylin's grip tightened on the rifle. Cole. The 4th stop on her route. A trapper who lived alone, 2 hours past the McGraw brothers' claim. What hadn't her uncle told her? She didn't sleep again that night. At first light, Maylin saddled Daisy and prepared to leave. Mrs. Willis came out with a package wrapped in cloth. Biscuits, she said, and some advice. When you get to Cole's place, you leave the supplies at the edge of his clearing. Don't go to the cabin. Don't knock. Just leave them and go. Why? Mrs. Willis looked at her with something like pity. Because Rowan Cole doesn't like visitors, and he especially doesn't like, she gestured vaguely at Maylin, complications. What does that mean? It means be careful, and whatever you do, don't stay after dark. The McGraw brothers were easier, 2 young men more interested in their mail than in Maylin. They paid quickly, barely looked at her, and went back to working their claim, which left one stop, the one everyone seemed afraid to talk about. Maylin followed the trail higher, into territory where the trees grew twisted and sparse, where the wind carried ice even in summer, where the silence felt heavy with waiting. She saw the cabin before she saw any clearing. It sat against a cliff face, built from massive logs that looked like they'd been dragged from the forest by something stronger than any man. Smoke rose from the chimney in a straight gray line. Maylin dismounted at the edge of the clearing, just as Mrs. Willis had advised. Her hand shook as she unloaded the supplies: coffee, salt, ammunition, tobacco. She worked quickly, wanting to finish and leave. That's when she felt it, the sensation of being watched. She turned slowly. A man stood at the edge of the trees, so still she'd mistaken him for a shadow. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing furs and leather that made him look like part of the wilderness itself. His face was hard to see in the forest dimness, but his eyes, she could see those clearly. They were blue, cold as glacier ice, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Rowan Cole. Had to be. Supplies from Chen's general store, Maylin said, her voice steadier than she felt. I can leave them here or bring them closer to the cabin. Whatever you prefer. He didn't answer, didn't move, just watched her with those unsettling eyes. Maylin's hand drifted toward the rifle still strapped to Daisy's saddle. Don't. His voice was rough from disuse, but clear. A command, not a suggestion. She froze. Cole walked forward, moving with the easy confidence of a predator in its own territory. He was older than she'd first thought, maybe mid-30s, his face weathered by mountain winters and marked with old scars. His hair was dark, long enough to touch his shoulders, shot through with premature gray. He stopped a few feet away and looked at the supplies, then at her. Where's Jackson? He quit. I'm the new runner. Chen's out of his mind sending you up here. Apparently everyone thinks that. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite amusement, but close. They're right. He crouched down and sorted through the supplies with practiced efficiency. This everything? Maylin checked her list. Yes. Payment is... He pulled out a leather pouch and tossed it to her. She caught it reflexively, feeling the weight of coins inside. There's extra in there, he said, standing. For the trouble. What trouble? Cole looked at her then, really looked at her, and Mei Lin felt something shift in the air between them. The trouble of being you, in this place, doing this work. He gestured toward Daisy. That mare's tired. You push her much harder today, she'll go lame. I have one more stop. Sullivan's moved down to Red Pine for the winter 2 weeks ago. Your uncle should have told you that. He picked up his supplies in one smooth motion. There's a lean-to on the north side of the cabin. You can shelter there tonight. Leave at first light. I don't need... It wasn't an offer. He turned and walked toward his cabin, then paused and looked back. And don't go wandering around at night. Bears are active, and I don't like shooting them unless I have to. Then he was gone, disappearing into his cabin and closing the door with a finality that clearly meant the conversation was over. Mei Lin stood in the clearing, holding the leather pouch, trying to process what had just happened. Rowan Cole, the man everyone seemed afraid of, the man Mrs. Willis had warned her about, had just given her money, shelter, and advice. Not exactly the monster she'd been led to expect. The lean-to was exactly what he'd said, a three-sided structure with a roof stacked with dry firewood and sheltered from the wind. Mei Lin unsaddled Daisy and rubbed the horse down, then built a small fire and sat watching the flames dance while darkness claimed the mountains. She thought about Red Pine Crossing, about her uncle's shop, about the boarding house, and the man who'd tried to force his way into her room. She thought about Mrs. Willis's warning, and the McGraw brothers' indifference, and the logging camp men's predatory stares. And she thought about Cole's eyes, blue and cold, but somehow not cruel, hard, but not hostile. He'd said she was trouble just for being who she was. Maybe he was right. Maybe that's all she'd ever be in this place. Trouble, complication, the thing that didn't fit. But she'd made the trip. She'd survived, and tomorrow she'd ride back to Red Pine Crossing with money in her pocket and proof that she could do what no one thought possible. The fire crackled. The mountains breathed cold air down from their peaks. And Mei Lin fell asleep not in a cold barn or a rented room, but in shelter offered by the one man in these mountains who'd looked at her and seen something other than trouble. She didn't know it yet, but that night would change everything. Because sometimes survival isn't about fitting in. Sometimes it's about finding the one place, the one person, where you don't have to. Dawn came cold and gray, the kind of morning that made everything feel harder than it was. Mei Lin woke with frost on her blanket and her muscles screaming protest at every movement. She'd slept fitfully, half expecting bears or worse, but nothing had disturbed the night except the wind moving through the pines. The cabin door opened just as she was saddling Daisy. Cole emerged carrying 2 items, a canteen and a cloth-wrapped bundle. He approached without speaking and handed them to her. Water's fresh from the spring, food's enough to get you down the mountain without stopping. He glanced at her hands, red and chapped from the cold. You need better gloves. I'll manage. That's what the last runner said before he lost 2 fingers to frostbite. Cole pulled a pair of leather gloves from his coat pocket and held them out. Take them. Mei Lin hesitated. Accepting gifts meant obligation, and she'd learned that lesson young. I can't pay you for these. Didn't ask you to. He waited, his expression unreadable. When she still didn't take them, he dropped them onto the saddle. Suit yourself. Freeze if you want. He turned to go, then stopped and looked back at her with those cold blue eyes. You did better than I expected. Most people quit halfway through their first run. Most people have other options. Something shifted in his face, recognition maybe. Like he understood exactly what she meant. Yeah, I guess they do. He went back inside without another word, and Mei Lin was left standing in the clearing with expensive gloves and questions she couldn't ask. She put the gloves on. They were too big, clearly made for his hands, but they were warm and well made. She told herself it was practical, not personal. The ride down the mountain took most of the day. Daisy knew the route now and moved with more confidence, which helped because Mei Lin's attention kept drifting. She replayed the conversation with Cole, trying to understand what had just happened. He'd been nothing like what she'd expected. Not cruel, not hostile, just solitary, guarded. Like a man who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what it felt like to let anyone past them. She understood that better than she wanted to admit. Red Pine Crossing appeared in the valley below just as the sun began its descent. From this height, it looked almost peaceful, the buildings toy-sized and harmless. But Mei Lin knew better. She could already feel the weight of returning, of walking back into a place that had made it clear she wasn't welcome. Her uncle was waiting at the stable when she rode in. He took one look at her, exhausted, dirty, but whole, and something like relief crossed his face before he could hide it. "You made it. You sound surprised." "I am." He helped her dismount, his movements brisk and efficient. "The Sullivans already moved down for winter. You knew that." He had the decency to look guilty. "I wasn't sure. They change their minds sometimes." Maylin handed him the payment pouches and the bills of lading. "Everything's accounted for, plus extra from Cole." Her uncle's eyebrows rose. "Cole gave you extra?" "Said it was for the trouble." "Huh." He counted the money carefully, then handed her share back, $10, as promised. "Same run next month, if you want it." "I want it." He nodded slowly, studying her face like he was seeing her for the first time. "You've got dirt on your cheek, and you smell like horse." "I know, but you made it. Against all sense and reason, you made it." He almost smiled. Almost. "Your room at the boarding house is paid through tomorrow. After that, you're on your own again." Nothing had changed then. She'd proven herself capable, and it still wasn't enough to earn a permanent place. Maylin took the money and turned away before her uncle could see how much that hurt. The boarding house owner barely glanced at her when she walked in. "You're back. For one more night." The woman went back to kneading bread dough, her thick hands working the mass with practiced violence. "Sheriff was here asking about you." Maylin's stomach dropped. "Why?" "Didn't say. Just wanted to know when you'd be back." She slapped the dough down hard. "You're drawing attention, girl. The wrong kind. Whatever you're planning, do it quiet." Maylin climbed the stairs to her tiny room and collapsed on the bed without bothering to wash. Every muscle ached. Her hands were blistered despite the gloves. Her back felt like someone had beaten it with a hammer. But she'd done it. 3 days in the mountains, 5 stops, and she'd survived. $10 richer. $10 closer to... what? She didn't even know. A future that didn't involve running, maybe. A place where she could stop looking over her shoulder. She fell asleep still wearing her boots for the second night in a row. The knock came just after dawn. Loud, official, not asking for permission. Maylin opened the door to find Sheriff Morton standing in the hallway, his face carved from the same stone as his expression. 2 men flanked him, deputies probably, though they wore no badges. "Miss Chen." "Sheriff, need to ask you some questions. Down at my office." It wasn't a request. Maylin pulled on her coat and followed them down the stairs, feeling every eye in the boarding house tracking her movement. The landlady stood in her kitchen doorway, her expression saying, "I told you so," without words. The sheriff's office was a small building that smelled like old coffee and wood smoke. Morton sat behind his desk and gestured for Maylin to take the chair across from him. The 2 deputies positioned themselves by the door, not threatening exactly, but definitely blocking the exit. "You made a supply run up into the mountains," Morton said. No preamble. "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes." "Visit Rowan Cole's place?" There it was, the real question underneath all the others. Maylin kept her voice level. "I delivered supplies, as contracted, same as the other stops." "How long were you there?" "Long enough to unload and get paid." "That all that happened?" Maylin met his eyes. "What are you asking me, Sheriff?" Morton leaned back in his chair, his hand resting on his gun belt in a gesture that was probably unconscious but definitely intimidating. "Cole's got a reputation. Man like that, alone in the mountains, sees a woman like you." He let the implication hang in the air. "A woman like me." "Don't play stupid. You know what I mean." "I don't, actually." "Why don't you explain it?" His jaw tightened. "I'm trying to protect you here. By assuming I need protecting, or by assuming Mr. Cole is dangerous?" Maylin leaned forward slightly. He was professional. He paid fairly. He offered shelter for the night because my horse was tired and it wasn't safe to ride in the dark. That's all. "You spent the night there?" "In a lean-to. Alone." "You expect me to believe that?" "I don't care what you believe, Sheriff. I'm telling you what happened." One of the deputies shifted position, his hand moving toward his gun. Morton noticed and raised a hand slightly, signaling him to stand down. "Listen to me carefully," Morton said, his voice dropping to something quieter but no less threatening. This town has rules. Unwritten maybe, but rules nonetheless. Women don't go into the mountains alone, they don't do men's work, and they especially don't spend nights at the home of a man with Cole's history. What history? That's not your concern. It is if you're using it to threaten me. Morton stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm not threatening you. I'm warning you. People are talking. Your uncle's reputation is suffering because of your behavior. The decent women in this town are concerned about the example you're setting. If you continue this work, if you continue making these trips, he paused, choosing his words carefully, consequences will follow. What kind of consequences? The kind that happen when a community decides someone doesn't belong. Mei Lin stood as well, refusing to be intimidated by his height or his authority. I've broken no laws. I've caused no harm. I've simply worked to support myself because no one else would give me the chance. Sometimes the law isn't enough. Morton moved around the desk, standing too close, using his physical presence as a weapon. This is a small town, Miss Chen. We take care of our own. And you? He shook his head. You're not one of us. You'll never be one of us. The sooner you accept that and move on to somewhere more appropriate, the better it'll be for everyone. By appropriate, you mean somewhere I won't be seen. I mean somewhere you belong. Mei Lin held his gaze for a long moment, then turned and walked to the door. The deputies moved aside, but slowly, making her squeeze past them. She stepped out into the morning sunlight, feeling like she'd escaped something, though she couldn't name what exactly. Behind her, Morton called out, "Next time you go up that mountain, don't come back down." She didn't respond, didn't give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd rattled her, but her hands shook as she walked back toward the boarding house. And by the time she reached her room, she was fighting tears she refused to let fall. The next week passed in a strange limbo. Mei Lin's money lasted longer than expected because no one would sell to her. The restaurant refused her business. The general store served her only when her uncle wasn't there, and even then the clerk overcharged and gave incorrect change that was never in her favor. The laundry woman literally shut her door when Mei Lin approached. She ate stale bread and apples purchased from a farm outside town, where the elderly couple either didn't know or didn't care about Red Pine Crossing's social rules. She stayed in her room as much as possible, avoiding the stares and whispers, but word of her mountain trip spread anyway. It moved through the town like smoke, twisting and thickening with each retelling. By the third day, she'd allegedly spent 3 nights at Cole's cabin. By the 5th day, she'd gone there deliberately, seeking him out. By the week's end, the gossip had transformed her supply run into something scandalous and shameful. Mei Lin heard the whispers everywhere. In the boarding house hallways, outside the general store, at the town well where women gathered to collect water and exchange news. Shameless, that's what she is. Can you imagine? A woman alone with that man? Everyone knows what kind of person Cole is. And her, walking around like she's done nothing wrong. Chinese women have different morals, I've heard. Someone should do something before she corrupts the whole town. On the 8th day, Mrs. Patterson organized a meeting at the church. Mei Lin wasn't invited, but she heard about it anyway. The whole town turned out, at least all the respectable women and their husbands. Mrs. Patterson, a rail-thin woman with a face like a hatchet, stood at the pulpit and addressed the crowd with the fervor of someone who believed righteousness and cruelty were the same thing. "We must protect the moral character of our community," she declared, her voice echoing off the church walls. "We cannot allow this woman to continue her shameful behavior. She flaunts herself. She consorts with dangerous men. She shows no respect for decent society." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the pews. "I propose," Mrs. Patterson continued, "that we take action, formally, legally, if necessary. This woman should be removed from Red Pine Crossing for the good of all." Mei Lin heard all this secondhand from the boarding house cook, a young woman named Sarah who seemed to feel guilty about the town's treatment, even if she wasn't brave enough to speak against it. "They're really going to try to make you leave," Sarah whispered, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one heard. Mrs. Patterson's got the sheriff on her side. And the mayor. They're talking about vagrancy laws, public morals charges, anything they can use. "I've done nothing illegal." "Doesn't matter. They've decided you're the problem." Sarah's expression was pained. "I'm sorry. I wish people were different here. But they're not. No, they're not. 2 days later, the boarding house owner delivered the final blow. Your week's been up for days. I've let you stay out of Christian charity, but I can't anymore. Mrs. Patterson's threatening to organize a boycott of my business if I continue housing you. She wouldn't meet Mei Lin's eyes. You need to be out by tomorrow morning. Mei Lin packed her single trunk in silence. She had $15 now, the supply run payment plus a few dollars saved from careful spending. It wasn't enough to go anywhere or do anything. It was just enough to delay the inevitable. That night, she sat in her room and faced the truth she'd been avoiding. She had no future here. The town had decided she was unacceptable, and nothing she did would change that. She could make 100 supply runs, earn $1,000, live a perfectly moral life, and it wouldn't matter. She would always be foreign, always be suspect, always be the problem. She thought about leaving. The stagecoach ran twice a week. She could buy passage to somewhere else, start over in another town where no one knew her. But what would be different? She'd still be Chinese in a country that didn't want her. Still be a woman alone in a world built for men. Still be someone with no family, no connections, no safety. At least here, she had work. Brutal, dangerous work that no one else wanted, but work nonetheless. The next morning, Mei Lin carried her trunk to her uncle's shop. He looked up from his ledger, surprise flickering across his face. The boarding house won't keep me anymore. He sighed. I heard. I need somewhere to store this. She gestured to the trunk. Just until I figure out what to do next. Her uncle was quiet for a long moment, his internal struggle visible on his face. Finally, he nodded. You can sleep in the back room. Temporarily. But you enter and leave through the alley door only. No one can see you here. It was humiliating. It was also survival. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this out of kindness. I'm doing it because... He trailed off, then shook his head. Just be quiet and stay out of sight. Mei Lin moved into the storage room that night. It was barely bigger than a closet filled with excess inventory and smelling of dried goods and dust. But it had a door that locked and a small window. And after the boarding house, it felt almost safe. Almost. 3 days passed. Mei Lin stayed hidden, emerging only after dark to use the outhouse and wash at the pump behind the building. During the day, she helped her uncle inventory stock, carefully staying in the back where no customers could see her. He paid her nothing, but the room was payment enough. On the 4th night, someone threw a rock through the shop window. Mei Lin woke to the crash of breaking glass and her uncle's cursing. She grabbed her coat and ran to the front of the shop, where her uncle stood amid scattered shards, holding a rock with a piece of paper tied around it. He read the note, his face going pale. Then he handed it to her without speaking. The message was simple, written in crude letters. Get rid of the whore, or we'll burn you out. Mei Lin felt something cold settle in her stomach. I'll leave tonight. No. Her uncle's voice was tight with anger, not at her, she realized, but at the town. I won't be threatened, not by these people, not by anyone. Uncle, they'll destroy everything you've built. Let them try. He crumpled the note and threw it into the corner. Your family. I should have remembered that from the beginning. It was the kindest thing he'd said to her since she'd arrived. It was also too late. The next day, Mrs. Patterson herself came to the shop, accompanied by Sheriff Morton and 3 other men, Mei Lin recognized as town council members. Mr. Chen, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice dripping false sweetness. We need to discuss a community concern. My shop is closed for private business, her uncle replied coldly. This won't take long. She glanced toward the back room, where Mei Lin stood in the doorway. We know you're sheltering her. We know she's been living here in violation of several town ordinances regarding proper housing and moral conduct. She's my niece. This is my property. I can shelter whoever I choose. Sheriff Morton stepped forward. Actually, you can't. Town code requires all residents to maintain proper housing that meets minimum standards. That storage room doesn't qualify. And there are concerns about her profession. She's a supply runner, her uncle said. Legal work. Is it? Or is she using that as a cover for other activities? Mrs. Patterson's smile was sharp as broken glass. We've heard reports, disturbing reports about her time in the mountains, about her relationship with certain individuals. You mean Cole, Mei Lin said, stepping into the room. Say his name. If you're going to accuse me of something, have the courage to be specific. Mrs. Patterson's eyes glittered. Very well. You've been conducting an immoral relationship with Rowan Cole. You spent the night at his home. You've been seen wearing clothing he gave you. She gestured to the gloves hanging from Mei Lin's coat pocket. You're bringing shame to this community, and we won't tolerate it any longer. I delivered supplies and accepted shelter from bad weather. That's all. That's not what people are saying. People are saying what you're telling them to say. Mei Lin felt her anger rising, hot and sharp. You've decided I'm guilty of something, so you're creating crimes to match your judgment. How dare you? No, how dare you? Mei Lin stepped closer, surprising herself with her own boldness. I've done nothing wrong. Nothing illegal, nothing immoral. I've worked hard, kept to myself, and tried to survive in a place that's made it clear I'm not welcome. And instead of leaving me alone, instead of just letting me exist, you've decided to destroy me. Why? Because I'm different? Because I don't fit your narrow definition of acceptable? Sheriff Morton's hand moved to his gun. That's enough. Is it? Or are you going to arrest me for speaking the truth? Mei Lin looked at each of them in turn. You talk about morality, but where's the morality in this? In turning away someone who needs help? In spreading lies and organizing hatred? In threatening an old man's business because he showed basic human decency? You need to leave Red Pine Crossing, Mrs. Patterson said flatly. Today, now, we're offering you one chance to go quietly. If you refuse, we'll have the sheriff remove you by force. On what charge? Vagrancy, public disturbance, moral turpitude. Morton ticked them off on his fingers. I can find something that'll stick. And once you're arrested, you'll be run out of town anyway, but with a record that'll follow you everywhere you go. Her uncle started to protest, but Mei Lin put a hand on his arm. She could see the trap clearly now. Fight, and they'd destroy her and her uncle both. They'd burn the shop, ruin his reputation, make an example of them both. They wanted her to fight because it would justify everything they planned to do. But what choice did she have? Where could she go? She had $15 and a horse that wasn't even hers. No family except an uncle who'd just found his courage too late. No friends. No connections. No future. I need time to gather my things, Mei Lin said quietly. Mrs. Patterson smiled, victorious. You have 1 hour. They left, their footsteps echoing on the wooden floor like a judge's gavel. Mei Lin stood in the center of her uncle's shop, surrounded by goods she'd helped inventory, in a town that had never wanted her, facing a future that looked like a cliff edge in fog. Her uncle put his hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry. I should have fought harder from the beginning. You fought when it mattered. It wasn't enough. No. Mei Lin looked around the shop, at the life her uncle had built through years of careful compromise and quiet endurance. But it was something. She went to the storage room and packed her trunk. It didn't take long. She owned almost nothing. The embroidered dress, now more patched than original fabric, a few changes of underclothes, the gloves Cole had given her, the rifle her uncle had loaned her for the supply run. An hour later, she stood in the alley behind the shop with her trunk and no idea where to go. Take Daisy, her uncle said. Consider it payment for the work you did. She's yours now. I can't. Take her. His voice was firm. And take this. He pressed a cloth bag into her hands. Inside, Mei Lin found food, ammunition, and a roll of bills, at least another $20. Uncle, that's too much. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. His eyes were wet, though he didn't let the tears fall. I failed you, Mei Lin. I let fear make me weak. I don't know if you can forgive that. There's nothing to forgive. There's everything to forgive. He pulled her into a brief, awkward hug. Be safe. Be smart. And remember, you're stronger than this town deserves. Mei Lin saddled Daisy and loaded her trunk. The late afternoon sun painted the mountains gold and purple, the same colors she'd seen her first day in Red Pine Crossing. It felt like years ago, instead of weeks. She turned Daisy north toward the mountains because it was the only direction she knew. The trail was familiar now, less frightening than the unknown roads leading anywhere else. And somewhere up there, in the high country where the air was thin and the silence vast, was a man who'd treated her like a person instead of a problem. Maybe he'd let her stay for a while. Maybe she could work for him, earn her keep somehow. Or maybe he'd turn her away like everyone else, and she'd have to keep riding until the mountains ran out, or she did. Either way, she wasn't going back to Red Pine Crossing. Whatever happened next, it would be on her terms. The trail climbed, and Mei Lin climbed with it, leaving the town behind. She didn't look back. By nightfall, she'd reached the Willis homestead. The old woman came out with her shotgun, then lowered it when she recognized Mei Lin. "You're back early. Next supply run isn't for 2 weeks." "I'm not on a supply run." Mrs. Willis studied her face, then looked at the loaded trunk strapped to Daisy's back. Understanding dawned slowly. "Town ran you out." "More or less." "Damn fools, why..." Mrs. Willis spat into the dirt. "Where you headed?" "I don't know yet." The old woman was quiet for a moment, then nodded toward her barn. "Stay the night. Figure it out in the morning when you're not dead tired." Mei Lin almost refused. Her pride still had some life left in it, but exhaustion won. "Thank you." That night, lying in the hay, listening to Mrs. Willis's husband cough in the cabin, Mei Lin let herself cry for the first time since this had all started. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that soaked into the hay and disappeared. In the morning, Mrs. Willis pressed a package of food into her hands. "Cole's place is about 6 hours from here. I suspect that's where you're headed." "I don't know if he'll let me stay." "He will, or he won't. But he's the only man in these mountains who won't judge you for what you are or what the town says you did." She paused. "He's had his own troubles with Red Pine Crossing, lost his wife and daughter to fever 5 years back. The doctor wouldn't come up the mountain to treat them, said it wasn't worth the trip for mountain trash. By the time Cole got them down to town, it was too late. He ain't been back since." The story hit Mei Lin like a physical blow. Suddenly, Cole's isolation made terrible sense. "I didn't know." Most people don't. They just know he's dangerous and different and lives alone. Same words they use about you, I'd bet. Mrs. Willis touched Mei Lin's arm briefly. Sometimes the people the world casts out are the only ones who understand what it means to belong to nothing but yourself. Mei Lin rode north, the words echoing in her mind. The trail was harder in late autumn, the air colder, the sky grayer. But she knew the route now, knew where the trail narrowed and where to watch for rock slides. Cole's clearing appeared in late afternoon, smoke rising from the chimney in that same straight gray line. Mei Lin dismounted at the edge of the trees, suddenly uncertain. What was she doing here? She had no right to ask this man for help, no claim on his kindness or his space. She was still standing there, frozen with indecision, when Cole emerged from the cabin. He stopped when he saw her, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Cole walked forward slowly, his eyes taking in her loaded trunk, her exhausted horse, her face that probably showed exactly how desperate she felt. "You run the supplies already?" he asked. "No, Mei Lin's voice caught. She forced it steady. "The town decided I was a problem. They gave me a choice. Leave or be arrested on false charges." "So you came here?" "I didn't know where else to go." Cole looked at her for a long moment, his blue eyes seeing everything she was trying to hide. The fear, the exhaustion, the complete absence of options. "What are you asking me?" "I don't know. Work, maybe. A place to stay until I figure out what to do next. I can pay. I don't need money. Then I can work. I'm not useless. I can cook, clean, help with whatever you need. I won't be a burden." "You already are a burden," he said bluntly. "The question is whether I'm willing to carry it." The words should have hurt, but they didn't. They were honest, and honesty was more valuable than kindness right now. Cole turned and walked toward the cabin, then paused and looked back. "Bring your horse. There's space in the shelter behind the cabin. We'll talk after you're settled." It was an agreement, but it wasn't refusal either. Mei Lin followed him into the clearing, into the unknown, into whatever came next. Behind her, the trail down to Red Pine Crossing faded into forest shadow. Ahead, smoke rose from the chimney of a cabin built by a man who understood what it meant to be cast out. Sometimes survival meant accepting help from the last person the world expected you to trust. Sometimes it meant trusting yourself enough to take the risk. The shelter behind the cabin was larger than Mei Lin expected, built with the same solid craftsmanship as everything else Cole had made. Daisy settled into the space easily, already familiar with it from the previous visit. Mei Lin unsaddled the mare and brushed her down, her hands moving automatically while her mind raced with uncertainty about what came next. Cole appeared in the doorway, watching her work. "You know what you're doing with horses now." "I learned fast. Had to. Most people don't." He leaned against the door frame, his arms crossed. "Inside, we need to talk." The cabin's interior was sparse but functional. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, its fire crackling with steady warmth. A rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies, and in the corner, a bed covered with furs. Everything was clean, organized, purposeful. Nothing decorative, nothing soft. It was the home of a man who'd stripped his life down to essentials and found comfort in the absence of anything more. Cole gestured to one of the chairs. Mei Lin sat, her back straight despite her exhaustion. He poured coffee from a pot on the fire and set a cup in front of her before taking the other chair. "Tell me exactly what happened in town," he said. So she did. The whole story. From the gossip after her first supply run to the broken window and Mrs. Patterson's ultimatum. She didn't embellish or soften it. Cole's expression remained neutral throughout, but something shifted in his eyes when she mentioned the rumors about him. "They're still talking about me down there," he said when she finished. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "What do they say?" "That you're dangerous. That women shouldn't go near you." Mei Lin wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, grateful for its warmth. "Mrs. Willis told me about your wife and daughter. I'm sorry." Cole's jaw tightened. "Don't be. Pity doesn't help anyone." "It's not pity, it's understanding why you left." "I didn't leave. They killed my family through neglect and prejudice, then acted like I should be grateful they eventually tried to help." His voice was flat, emotionless, but the words carried weight. "I built this cabin 6 months after I buried them. Haven't set foot in Red Pine Crossing since." "Don't you need supplies?" "I order through Chen. Someone delivers once a month. Used to be Jackson, then you." He studied her over his coffee. "Now you're here asking to stay. You understand how that looks." "I understand you have every reason to say no." "That's not what I meant." Cole set his cup down. "The town already thinks we're doing something shameful. You staying here will confirm every rumor they've spread. It'll make things worse for you. Worse than being homeless, worse than having no food, no money, no options." Mei Lin met his eyes. "They've already decided I'm guilty. What I actually do doesn't matter anymore." "It matters to me." The words hung in the air between them. Cole stood and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains darkening in the twilight. "I'm not a good man, Mei Lin. Not anymore. I don't have patience for small talk or social niceties. I work hard, keep to myself, and prefer silence to conversation. This cabin isn't comfortable by most standards. Winter up here is brutal, and I can't promise you safety because the truth is, I'm barely keeping myself together some days." "You're honest. That's more than most people." He turned back to face her. "You can stay. Temporarily. There's a lean-to on the north side I can close in, make it livable. You'll have your own space. In exchange, you help with work around here, cooking, preserving food, whatever needs doing. When spring comes, we reassess. That sound acceptable?" Relief flooded through Mei Lin so strongly she had to blink back tears. "Yes. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You might hate it here." "I might, but I'll hate it with a roof over my head and food in my stomach." Something almost like a smile crossed Cole's face. "Fair enough." He spent the next 2 days closing in the lean-to, transforming it from open shelter into a proper room. Mei Lin helped where she could, holding boards, passing nails, learning to use tools she'd never touched before. Cole was a patient teacher when he bothered to teach, though most of the time he worked in silence, his movements efficient and practiced. When the room was finished, it was small but solid. Cole installed a small wood stove for heat, built a simple bed frame, and even hung her trunk on pegs driven into the wall. "It's not much," he said, surveying the work. "It's mine. That's more than I've had in a long time." The first week passed in a strange rhythm. Mei Lin woke before dawn and started coffee, learning how Cole liked it, strong enough to stand a spoon in. She cooked breakfast, simple food that filled empty stomachs without pretense. Cole ate quickly and left to work, checking trap lines, splitting wood, repairing things that needed repairing. Mei Lin cleaned, organized, figured out the patterns of his life and how to fit into them without disrupting. They spoke little. Cole wasn't much for conversation, and Mei Lin was too uncertain of her place to push. But the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who'd both learned that words could be weapons, and sometimes quiet was safer. On the 8th day, Cole returned from his trapline carrying 3 rabbits. He dropped them on the table and looked at Mei Lin. "You know how to dress game?" "No." "Time to learn then." He taught her with the same patient efficiency he brought to everything, showing her how to skin and clean the animals, which parts to keep and which to discard, how to prepare the meat for cooking or preserving. It was messy, bloody work, and Mei Lin's hands shook at first. But Cole didn't comment on her squeamishness, just corrected her technique when she went wrong and nodded when she got it right. "You're a quick learner," he said when they finished. "I don't have the luxury of being slow." "No, I guess you don't." That night, Mei Lin made rabbit stew with herbs she'd found growing near the cabin. Cole ate 2 bowls without speaking, then looked at her across the table. "This is good." "Thank you." "Anna used to make something similar, different spices, but the same idea." He said his wife's name carefully, like testing weight on ice. "She was a better cook than me, better at most things, honestly." It was the first time he'd volunteered information about his past. Mei Lin stayed quiet, letting him decide how much to share. "She grew up in Philadelphia," Cole continued, "came west with her father when he got appointed to some territorial position. I was working construction, helping build the first real buildings in Red Pine Crossing. We met when I nearly dropped a beam on her." His expression softened slightly, remembering. "She read books. Lots of books. Used to tell me about them while I worked. I'd listen and pretend I understood half of what she said. She sounds remarkable." "She was." Cole stood and moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. "Our daughter, Emma, had her mother's brains. Only 4 years old and already reading simple words, asking questions about everything." His voice roughened. "The fever took Emma first. 3 days of burning up while I rode down to Red Pine Crossing begging the doctor to come. He said he was too busy. Said mountain families should know better than to settle so far from help. By the time I got back, Emma was gone. Anna lasted another day, and then..." He stopped, his shoulders rigid. Mei Lin didn't know what to say. There were no words adequate for that kind of loss. "I'm telling you this," Cole said, still facing the fire, "because you need to understand what you're walking into. That town destroyed my life, and now you're running from them too. We're both damaged by the same poison. That creates a connection, but it doesn't create trust. Not automatically." "I understand." "Do you?" He turned to look at her. "Because if you stay here, if we continue this arrangement, the town will assume the worst. They already do. When spring comes and the supply runs start again, word will spread. People will talk. It'll get ugly." "It's already ugly. It can get worse, much worse." Cole moved back to the table, sitting down heavily. "I'm not afraid of the town. I stopped caring what they think a long time ago. But you're young. You have a whole life ahead of you. You could start over somewhere else, somewhere the rumors haven't reached. Being here, with me, will make that harder. Maybe I don't want to start over somewhere else. Maybe I'm tired of running." "Then you're a fool." "Probably." Mei Lin met his eyes. "But I'm a fool with nowhere else to go and nothing left to lose. So I'm staying, at least until spring, if you'll still have me." Cole studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Until spring, then." November brought snow, first in light dustings that melted by afternoon, then in heavy storms that buried the clearing in white silence. Mei Lin learned to split wood, to keep the fires burning, to recognize the signs of approaching weather in the way the wind shifted and the clouds moved. She learned Cole's routines and adapted to them. He woke at dawn and checked his trap lines 3 times a week, returning with rabbits, occasionally a fox, once a small deer that kept them in meat for weeks. He split wood every afternoon, his axe ringing through the forest in steady rhythm. He spoke little but listened when she talked, his attention complete even if his responses were brief. Mei Lin found herself talking more than she had in months, about San Francisco, about her parents, about the life she'd lost when the fire came. Cole didn't offer sympathy or advice, he just listened, and somehow that was exactly what she needed. One evening in late November, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Cole asked, "Do you regret coming here?" "No. Do you regret letting me stay?" "Ask me again in February when we're both sick of seeing each other." Mei Lin smiled. "That bad?" "Cabin fever's real, By March, most mountain folk are ready to kill their own families just for the variety. Good thing we're not family, then. Cole's expression shifted slightly, not quite a smile, but close. Good thing. The first real test came in early December when a storm hit that lasted 3 days. The snow piled so high they couldn't open the cabin door, had to dig out through a window just to reach the woodpile. The world disappeared into white chaos, the wind screaming around the cabin like something alive and angry. They were trapped together in close quarters with nothing to do but wait. Mei Lin expected tension, awkwardness, the strain of forced proximity. Instead, she found an unexpected comfort in the shared silence. Cole carved small wooden figures by the fire, a habit from his construction days, he said. Mei Lin mended clothes, organized supplies, read from the small collection of books Anna had left behind. On the second day, Cole taught her to play chess using pieces he'd carved years ago. He won every game, but Mei Lin learned quickly, and by the third day she'd managed to survive 15 moves before he trapped her king. "You're getting better," he said. "I'm getting destroyed slightly slower." Same thing. When the storm finally broke, they emerged into a world transformed. The clearing was buried under 4 feet of snow, the trees bent under white weight, the sky a blue so pure it hurt to look at. Cole surveyed the damage with a practiced eye. "We need to clear the roof before the next storm. If too much weight builds up, the whole thing could collapse." They spent the morning shoveling snow off the cabin roof, working side by side in companionable silence. Mei Lin's muscles screamed, but she pushed through, matching Cole's pace as best she could. When they finally finished, Cole looked at her with something like approval. "You're tougher than you look." "I've heard that before." "It's still true." That night, Mei Lin sat in her small room and realized she felt something she hadn't felt since before the fire. Safe. Not comfortable. Not settled, but safe. Protected not by walls or locks, but by the presence of someone who understood what it meant to survive when the world wanted you gone. She didn't know if Cole felt the same. He remained guarded, distant in ways that had nothing to do with physical space. But sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not attraction exactly, but recognition, like he saw in her something of himself. Christmas approached, though neither of them mentioned it. Mei Lin wasn't even sure Cole kept track of dates anymore. But on Christmas Eve, she woke to find a small wooden box on the table outside her room. Inside was a carved figure, a horse, delicate and detailed, clearly Daisy, based on the white sock on one leg. Cole was already gone on his morning trapline. When he returned that afternoon, Mei Lin had made a special dinner using the last of their dried fruit to make a sweet bread she remembered from childhood. She set the carved horse on the table between them as they ate. "Thank you. It's just wood. It's beautiful, and it's mine. That makes it valuable." Cole looked uncomfortable with the praise. "You're easy to please. I've learned to appreciate small gifts." They ate in silence for a while. Then Cole said, "Anna used to make sweetbread. Different recipe, but similar." "Is it hard, being reminded?" "Sometimes. Sometimes it's nice to remember that good things existed once." He met her eyes. "Thank you. For the bread, and for not making this day feel..." He trailed off, searching for words. "Lonely?" "Yeah, that." January brought deeper cold and shorter days. The sun barely cleared the mountains before sliding back down, leaving them in twilight for hours. Cole grew quieter, more withdrawn, and Mei Lin recognized the signs of grief settling heavy on him. She gave him space, didn't push for conversation, just maintained the routines that kept them both moving forward. One morning, she woke to find Cole gone and a note on the table. "Checking the high trap line. Back tomorrow." He'd never stayed out overnight before. Mei Lin spent the day trying not to worry, keeping busy with tasks that didn't need doing. But as darkness fell and the temperature dropped, fear crept in. The mountains were unforgiving in winter. One mistake, one injury, and Cole could freeze before morning. She barely slept, starting awake at every sound, imagining worse scenarios. Cole returned at noon the next day, snow-covered and exhausted but whole. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her face. "I left a note." "I know, I still worried." "Why?" Mei Lin realized she didn't have a good answer. Or rather, she had an answer she wasn't ready to say out loud. "Because if something happened to you, I'd be alone here, and I don't know if I could survive winter by myself." It was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The real truth was that somewhere in the past 3 months, Cole had become more than just shelter. He'd become the only person in the world who knew her, really knew her, and didn't judge what he saw. Cole set down his pack and moved to the fire, warming his hands. Fair point. I should have told you it might take 2 days. Next time, bring me with you. He looked at her, surprised. It's a hard climb, dangerous in winter. So teach me. I've learned everything else. You're serious? Completely. Something shifted in Cole's expression. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of trust. All right. Next trip, you come. But you do exactly what I say, when I say it. No arguments. Agreed. They started training the next week. Cole taught her to read snow conditions, to spot dangerous ice, to move efficiently through deep drifts. He showed her which trees were safe to shelter under and which might drop snow loads that could bury a person. He was patient but demanding, correcting her mistakes immediately and making her repeat things until she got them right. Your life depends on this, he said more than once. And so does mine if I'm relying on you. Maylin pushed herself harder than she ever had, determined to prove she could handle it. The work was exhausting, brutal, but it was also empowering. Each new skill was armor against helplessness, proof that she could adapt and survive. By late January, Cole deemed her ready. They packed light and headed up the mountain before dawn, the world still dark and bitterly cold. The trail was steep and treacherous, but Maylin kept pace, using everything Cole had taught her. They reached the high trap line by midday. Cole checked each trap methodically, resetting the ones that had been tripped, collecting the few animals they'd caught. Maylin watched and learned, asking questions when she didn't understand something. On the way back, she slipped on ice and nearly went over a cliff edge. Cole caught her arm at the last second, hauling her back from the drop with strength that surprised them both. They stood there for a moment, breathing hard, Maylin's heart hammering against her ribs. You all right? Cole asked, his hand still gripping her arm. Yes. Thank you. Pay attention. Getting distracted up here gets you killed. But his voice was shaken and his hand stayed on her arm a moment longer than necessary before he let go. That night, back at the cabin, the atmosphere felt different, charged somehow, like the air before a lightning strike. They ate dinner in silence, but it wasn't the comfortable quiet they'd developed. It was heavy with things unsaid. Maylin broke first. Can I ask you something? Depends what it is. Why did you really let me stay? Cole looked at her across the table. I told you. You needed help. You don't strike me as the type who helps people out of charity. I'm not. He was quiet for a long moment. I let you stay because when I looked at you that day, exhausted, desperate, but still standing, I saw someone who refused to break. The town tried to destroy you, but you came here instead of giving up. That takes strength. I respect. Is that all? What do you want me to say, Maylin? I want you to be honest. Cole stood and moved to the window, his back to her. Honest? Fine. I let you stay because being alone was killing me, and I was too stubborn to admit it. I let you stay because hearing another person's voice, having someone to cook for, to teach, to exist alongside, it reminded me that I'm still alive. Not just surviving, but alive. And I'd forgotten what that felt like. Maylin felt her chest tighten. Rowan, don't. He turned to face her. Don't say anything kind right now. I'm not looking for gratitude or sympathy. I'm just being honest like you asked. Then I'll be honest too. Staying here has been the first time since my parents died that I felt like I belong somewhere. Not because of the place, but because of... She hesitated, then pushed forward. Because of you. Because you see me as a person instead of a problem. The silence that followed was different from any that had come before. It was full of possibility and danger in equal measure. Cole crossed the room slowly and sat back down at the table. This is a bad idea. What is? Whatever's happening here. Between us. He looked at her, his blue eyes intense. I'm too old for you, too broken, too angry at the world. You deserve better. Maybe I don't want better. Maybe I want someone real. I'm real, all right. Real damaged, real bitter, real likely to hurt you even when I'm trying not to. I'll take my chances. Maylin, whatever he was going to say was cut off by the sound of horses approaching. Multiple horses, moving fast. Cole was on his feet instantly, grabbing his rifle. Stay inside. He went out into the cold night, and Mei Lin heard voices, angry, slurred with drink. Her stomach dropped. She knew those voices. Red Pine Crossing had found them. She grabbed her own rifle and followed Cole outside, ignoring his order to stay put. 5 men sat on horses at the edge of the clearing, their faces visible in the moonlight. She recognized them all: Sheriff Morton, 2 deputies, and 2 others from the town council. "Cole," Morton called out, "we need to talk." "Then talk and leave." "It's about the girl, the Chinese one." Morton's eyes found Mei Lin standing in the cabin doorway. "There she is. See, boys? Just like the rumors said." "What do you want, Morton?" Cole's voice was dead calm, which somehow made him more dangerous. "We want her to come back to Red Pine Crossing, face proper charges for vagrancy and moral misconduct. She's not going anywhere. That's not your decision to make." Morton dismounted, his hand resting on his gun. "She's violated multiple ordinances. We have the legal authority to bring her in. Your authority ends at town limits. This is private property." "This is territorial land, Cole. Don't pretend you own it legal." "I've worked this land for 5 years. Built everything here with my own hands. That makes it mine regardless of papers." Cole raised his rifle slightly. "And I'm telling you to leave." One of the deputies spoke up, emboldened by numbers. "You're harboring a known prostitute. That makes you complicit in her crimes." The word hit Mei Lin like a physical blow. Prostitute. They'd twisted everything, made her something shameful, something dirty. "Watch your mouth," Cole said, his voice dropping to something cold and lethal. "It's true though, isn't it?" Morton said. "She stays here, shares your cabin, does what?" "Exactly what you'd expect a woman like that to do." Cole moved so fast Mei Lin almost missed it. One moment he was standing still, the next his rifle was aimed directly at Morton's head. "Get off my land." The deputies drew their guns, but Cole didn't flinch. "You shoot me. My finger might slip. Question is, Morton, you willing to bet your life that it won't?" The standoff held for a long, terrible moment. Then Morton raised his hand, signaling his men to lower their weapons. "This isn't over, Cole. That girl is breaking the law. We'll be back with proper authority. Come back with an army if you want. Result will be the same." Morton remounted his horse, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "You're making a mistake protecting her. She's not worth it." "That's where you're wrong," Cole said. "She's worth more than this entire town put together." The words hung in this cold night air. Morton stared at Cole, then at Mei Lin, something calculating entering his expression. "Well," he said slowly, "isn't that interesting? The mountain man's found himself a woman. Wonder what his dead wife would think about that." Cole's rifle came up again, but Morton was already turning his horse. "We'll see you soon, Cole, and when we come back, it won't be for conversation." They rode off into the darkness, their horses' hoofbeats fading into the distance. Cole stood frozen for a long moment after they left, his rifle still raised, his whole body rigid with controlled violence. Then, slowly, he lowered the weapon and turned to face Mei Lin. "They'll be back," he said, "with more men, probably legal documents, definitely more guns. They won't stop until they either take you or I kill someone trying to prevent it." "I should leave. Go somewhere else before this gets worse." "And go where?" "They'll follow you. Use you to get to me because now they know I—" He stopped, jaw clenched. "Know you what?" "Know I care whether you live or die." The admission seemed to cost him something. "That gives them leverage." Mei Lin stepped closer. "Then we need to take away their leverage." "How?" She'd been thinking about this, turning it over in her mind since the moment Morton mentioned legal authority. There was only one way to make her untouchable, only one way to establish her right to be here beyond question. "Marry me," she said. Cole stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "What?" "Marry me. Tonight. Tomorrow. As soon as possible." The words came faster now, the plan forming as she spoke. "If we're married, I'm legally your wife. They can't remove me from my own home. They can't charge me with vagrancy or moral crimes. And their rumors become meaningless because we're doing exactly what they claim we are, but legally. That's insane." "Is it? Or is it the only option that doesn't end with you shooting a sheriff?" Cole shook his head. "You don't want to marry me, Mei Lin. You're just scared." "I am scared, terrified. But that doesn't make this wrong." She moved closer, close enough to see the conflict in his eyes. "You said I was worth more than the whole town. Did you mean it? Yes, but then prove it. Marry me. Not because you love me or because you want to, but because it's the only way to keep me safe. We can make it a business arrangement if you want. Protection in exchange for, I don't know, whatever you need, but do it. And when you realize you've trapped yourself with a broken man in the middle of nowhere, what then? Then at least I'll be trapped with a roof over my head and someone who sees me as human. Mei Lin reached out and touched his arm. I'm not asking for romance, Rowan. I'm asking for survival. Isn't that what we've both been doing since the beginning? Cole looked down at her hand on his arm, then at her face. For a moment, she saw past his walls to the lonely, grieving man underneath. The man who'd lost everything and rebuilt himself into something harder, colder, but still somehow capable of caring. If we do this, he said slowly, there's no going back. The town will never accept you then. You'll be tied to me and my reputation forever. Good. Maybe I want to be tied to someone who tells me the truth instead of lies dressed up as propriety. You're serious about this? Completely. Cole was quiet for a long time, his eyes searching hers for doubt or fear. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. All right, he said finally, we'll do it, but not for them, for us. Because you're right, it's the only way to end this without blood. He took her hand, his grip warm and solid. Tomorrow morning, we ride to the territorial magistrate over in Copper Falls. It's a day's journey, but he can make it legal. Then when Morton comes back with his papers and his threats, we'll have papers of our own. Mei Lin felt relief and terror in equal measure. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're about to become the wife of the most hated man in 3 counties. Better than being the unwanted woman in one. That almost smile crossed his face again. Fair point. They stood there in the cold clearing, still holding hands, the weight of what they'd just agreed to settling between them. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't what either of them had imagined for themselves. But it was real, and it was theirs. And sometimes that was enough. Inside the cabin, Mei Lin sat by the fire long after Cole had gone to bed. She looked at the carved horse he'd given her at Christmas, at the chess set they used every evening, at all the small signs of a life being built piece by piece from ruins. Tomorrow she would marry a man she barely knew. Tomorrow she would bind her future to his in ways she couldn't fully predict. Tomorrow she would make the final break from everything her old life had been. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Mei Lin felt like she had a choice. Not a good choice, maybe, not a safe one, but a choice nonetheless. And sometimes that was the only kind of freedom that mattered. They left before dawn, the horse's breath clouding white in the frozen air. Mei Lin had barely slept, her mind racing through everything that was about to change. Cole moved through his morning routine with the same quiet efficiency as always, but she caught him glancing at her more than usual, as if checking to make sure she hadn't changed her mind. She hadn't. If anything, the night had crystallized her resolve. This wasn't about love or romance. It was about survival, about taking control of her own fate instead of letting the world decide it for her. The trail to Copper Falls wound through territory Mei Lin had never seen, deeper into the mountains than even the highest trapline. Cole led the way, his posture easy despite the rough terrain. He'd made this trip before, apparently, though he didn't say when or why. They rode in silence for the first few hours, the only sounds the creak of saddle leather and the steady rhythm of hoofbeats. Finally, as the sun climbed higher and the cold began to ease slightly, Cole spoke. You can still change your mind. I know. I mean it, Mei Lin. We can turn around right now, find another way. What other way? She urged Daisy alongside his horse. You know there isn't one. Morton made that clear. There's always another way. It just might be harder. Harder than marrying you? She meant it as a joke, but it came out wrong. Too sharp. Cole's expression didn't change. Yeah, probably harder than that. They rode in silence again, and Mei Lin regretted her words. She didn't know how to do this, how to balance honesty with kindness, how to navigate the strange territory between strangers and something more. I'm sorry, she said after a while. That was cruel. It was honest. I'd rather have that than pretty lies. Still, you're helping me. I shouldn't make jokes at your expense. Cole glanced at her, something unreadable in his eyes. You think this is just me helping you? I'm getting something out of this too. What? Company. Purpose. Someone to keep me from disappearing completely into these mountains. He looked ahead at the trail. Anna used to say I had a tendency to drift away from the world, that if she didn't anchor me, I'd float off into my own head and never come back. After she died, I proved her right. This past year especially, I felt myself dissolving, like I'm becoming part of the landscape instead of a person living in it. Maylin understood that feeling better than she wanted to admit. And you think marrying me will change that? I think having someone to answer to, someone who expects me to show up for breakfast and remember to split enough wood and actually speak occasionally, yeah, I think that might keep me tethered. He shifted in his saddle. So don't act like this is charity. It's not. It's two people making a deal that benefits them both. A marriage of convenience. If you want to call it that, what would you call it? Cole was quiet for a long moment. Survival, same as everything else we do. They reached Copper Falls by late afternoon. It was barely a town, just a cluster of buildings serving the mining operations in the surrounding hills. The territorial magistrate worked out of a cramped office above the general store, a tired-looking man named Hutchins, who reviewed their request with weary skepticism. You understand this is a legal binding contract? He said, looking between them. Not something to be entered into lightly. We understand, Cole said. And you're both here of your own free will? Nobody's forcing this? Maylin met the magistrate's eyes. I'm choosing this freely. Hutchins studied her face, probably looking for signs of coercion or fear. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him because he sighed and pulled out the necessary forms. I'll need witnesses, and there's a filing fee of $2. Cole paid without hesitation. Hutchins called down to the store below and enlisted the shopkeeper and his wife as witnesses. They climbed the stairs looking curious and slightly scandalized. A mountain man and a Chinese woman getting married without ceremony or celebration was clearly unusual. The actual proceedings took less than 10 minutes. Hutchins read through the legal requirements in a monotone, asked them each to confirm their consent, and had them sign the certificate. The witnesses signed as well, their expressions carefully neutral. By the authority granted me by the territorial government, Hutchins said, I now pronounce you legally married. Congratulations. He said it like he was announcing a funeral. And just like that, Maylin was someone's wife. Cole's wife. Mrs. Rowan Cole, according to the paper Hutchins handed them. They walked out into the cold afternoon, legally bound, fundamentally unchanged. Maylin felt like she should feel different somehow, but she didn't. She was still herself, still carrying the same fears and uncertainties. Cole folded the marriage certificate carefully and tucked it inside his coat. We should stay here tonight. Too late to make it back before dark. They rented a room above the saloon, the only lodging available. It had one bed. Cole looked at it, then at Maylin, his expression carefully blank. I can sleep on the floor. Don't be ridiculous. The floor's freezing and you'll wake up unable to move. Maylin set her pack down. We're both adults. We can share a bed without it meaning anything. You sure? We've been living in the same cabin for months. This isn't much different. It was completely different, and they both knew it. But neither acknowledged it as they prepared for sleep, moving around each other with awkward politeness. Maylin changed into her sleeping clothes behind a screen while Cole checked the door lock 3 times. When she emerged, he was already under the covers, pressed against the far edge of the bed like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. Maylin climbed in on the other side, maintaining a careful distance between them. Good night, she said. Good night. They lay in the darkness, both pretending to sleep, both acutely aware of the other's presence. Maylin could hear Cole's breathing, slow and controlled, and wondered if he could hear her heart hammering. This was insane. She'd married a man she barely knew, legally bound herself to someone whose depths she'd only glimpsed. And for what? Safety? Protection? The illusion of control in a world determined to take it from her? You're thinking too loud, Cole said quietly. Sorry. What's on your mind? Wondering if we've made a terrible mistake. Probably have. He shifted slightly. But it's done now. Does that bother you? Being married to you? No. The circumstances that forced it? Yes. Maylin turned onto her side, facing his back in the darkness. Tell me about her. About Anna. Why? Because you loved her. And I need to know if you're going to spend our entire marriage comparing me to her and finding me lacking. Cole was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he rolled over, facing her across the space between them. In the dim light from the window, she could just make out his features. Anna was everything I wasn't: educated, graceful, comfortable with people. She could walk into a room and make everyone feel at ease. She saw good in the world, even when it gave her every reason not to. He paused. You're nothing like her. The word stung, though Maylin had asked for honesty. But that's not a criticism, Cole continued. Anna was soft where the world needed her to be hard. She trusted too much, believed too easily. It got her killed in the end. She believed that doctor would come, believed people were fundamentally decent. I'm not making that mistake again. So you want someone hard instead of soft. I want someone who understands that survival requires teeth. His eyes met hers. You've got teeth, Maylin. You've had to grow them to survive. That's not a flaw, it's armor. But you loved her softness. I did. I also failed to protect it. He reached out, almost touching her hand on the blanket between them, then pulled back. I won't fail again. With you, at least I know you can protect yourself if I'm not enough. Is that why you agreed to this? Because you think I don't need you? I agreed because I think we need each other. Different thing entirely. Maylin studied his face in the darkness, seeing past the hard exterior to the grief and guilt he carried. I won't try to replace her. Good, because you can't. Nobody can. He said it matter-of-factly, without cruelty. But maybe that's the point. This isn't about replacing anything. It's about building something new from the ruins we've both got left. They fell asleep eventually, the careful distance between them maintained even in unconsciousness. But sometime in the night, Maylin woke to find Cole's hand resting near hers, close enough to feel the warmth, and she didn't pull away. The ride back the next day felt different. They were returning to the cabin as husband and wife, a fact that hung between them like morning fog, present but intangible. Cole was quieter than usual, his attention focused on the trail, but Maylin caught him glancing at her occasionally with an expression she couldn't quite read. They arrived at the cabin just before dusk. Everything looked exactly as they'd left it, but Maylin saw it with new eyes now. This was her home. Legally, officially, undeniably. Nobody could take it from her. The thought brought unexpected emotion rising in her throat. She hadn't had a home, a real home that was hers, since the fire took everything. The boarding house had been temporary shelter. Her uncle's storage room had been charity. But this cabin, this rough collection of wood and stone in the middle of nowhere, was hers now. Cole noticed her expression as they unsaddled the horses. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She struggled to articulate it. I haven't had a home in so long. He nodded slowly, understanding crossing his face. Well, you've got one now. Not much of one, but it's solid. Won't fall down on you, at least. It's perfect. It's really not. Roof leaks in 3 places when it rains. The stove smokes if the wind's wrong, and the whole thing probably needs to be rechinked before next winter. Still perfect. Cole almost smiled. You're easy to please. I have low standards after the past year. Lucky for me. They settled back into routines, but everything felt slightly off kilter. Maylin still slept in the lean-to room, still cooked meals and maintained the cabin. Cole still worked his trap lines and split wood and spoke in monosyllables. But there was a new awareness between them, a consciousness of the bond they'd created. 3 days after their return, Sheriff Morton came back. He brought 8 men this time, all armed, all looking ready for trouble. They surrounded the cabin in a loose semicircle, their horses stamping nervously in the cold. Cole walked out to meet them, rifle in hand. Maylin followed, despite his gesture to stay inside. Morton's face was flushed with anger and alcohol. Cole, last chance to be reasonable about this. I'm always reasonable. You're the one who keeps showing up uninvited. I've got legal papers this time, signed by a territorial judge. They authorize me to remove the Chinese woman from these premises and return her to Red Pine Crossing to face charges. What charges specifically? Cole's voice was dangerously calm. Vagrancy, prostitution, moral corruption, and now resisting lawful authority. Morton pulled out a document and waved it. It's all here, legal and binding. That paper's worthless. The judge's signature says otherwise. The judge didn't know all the facts. Cole reached inside his coat and pulled out their marriage certificate. Maylin is my wife. Legally married 3 days ago in Copper Falls. certified by Magistrate Hutchins. That makes this her legal residence. That makes your charges invalid. And that makes your presence here an unlawful intrusion." Morton's face went from flushed to pale. He snatched the certificate from Cole's hand and read it, his expression darkening with each word. "You married her?" "Yes." "You actually married this Chinese whore." Cole moved so fast, Morton didn't have time to react. One moment they were standing apart, the next Cole had Morton by the throat, lifting him half off the ground. "Call her that again," Cole said quietly, "and I'll kill you. Legal consequences be damned." The deputies raised their rifles, but nobody fired. They could see in Cole's face that he meant it. He'd snap Morton's neck and deal with whatever came after. "Rowan, don't." Mei Lin's voice cut through the tension. "He's not worth it." Cole held Morton a moment longer, then released him. The sheriff stumbled back, gasping, his hand going to his throat. "This doesn't change anything," Morton wheezed. "Marriage or not, she's still my wife, Mrs. Rowan Cole, protected by law and by me." Cole stepped forward, forcing Morton back. "You want to arrest her? You'll have to arrest me too. You want to remove her from this property? You'll have to kill me first. And looking at your men, I don't think any of them are willing to die over your wounded pride." Morton looked around at his deputies. Several of them wouldn't meet his eyes. They'd signed up to enforce the law, not to commit murder over a grudge. "This isn't over," Morton said, but there was defeat in his voice. "Yes, it is." Cole's voice was final. "Go back to Red Pine Crossing. Tell Mrs. Patterson and the town council that Mei Lin is legally married and living on private property. Tell them she's under my protection. And tell them if anyone comes here again with threats or false charges, I'll start shooting first and sorting legality later." Morton remounted his horse, his face twisted with humiliated rage. "You've made enemies today, Cole. Powerful ones. I made those enemies 5 years ago when I chose to survive after your town killed my family. This changes nothing." The sheriff and his men rode off, their departure lacking the confident aggression of their arrival. Mei Lin watched them disappear into the trees, feeling something tight in her chest finally loosen. "Thank you," she said. Cole lowered his rifle. "Don't thank me for doing what needed doing. You defended me. You could have just shown them the certificate and sent them away. But you defended me. You're my wife now. That's what husbands do." "Is it?" Mei Lin moved closer. "Or is it what good men do?" "I'm not a good man." "You're better than you think." Cole looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he turned and walked back into the cabin without responding. But that night, when Mei Lin brought her things from the lean-to room and set them in the cabin proper, Cole didn't question it. He just moved some of his belongings to make space, accepting the change without comment. They still maintained separate sleeping arrangements. Cole in his bed, Mei Lin in a bedroll by the fire. But they were sharing the same space now, truly sharing it, and that felt like progress towards something neither of them could name yet. The weeks that followed established new patterns. Mei Lin learned to cure hides and prepare furs for eventual sale. Cole taught her to shoot properly, not just carry a rifle, taking her into the woods for target practice until she could hit what she aimed at more often than not. "You need to be able to protect yourself when I'm not here," he explained. "I can protect myself. With your fists, your sharp tongue, both useful, but a rifle's better." She improved quickly, finding a strange satisfaction in the discipline of shooting. Cole was a patient teacher, correcting her stance and breathing without criticism, praising her progress with brief nods that felt more valuable than elaborate compliments. They fell into an easy partnership, their movements around each other becoming natural. Mei Lin learned to read Cole's moods from small signs, the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. She knew when to offer conversation and when to leave him to his silence. Cole, in turn, became attuned to her rhythms. He noticed when she grew restless and needed to move, when she was thinking too hard about the past, when she needed reassurance that she wasn't a burden. One evening in late February, after a particularly hard day of work clearing fallen trees from around the cabin, they sat by the fire eating dinner in comfortable quiet. Cole set down his bowl and looked at her. "You've changed," he said. "How?" "You're stronger. Not just physically, though, that too, but you carry yourself different now, less like someone waiting for the world to knock you down. Malin considered this. I guess I've learned that I can get back up. That's made me less afraid of falling. Good. Fear makes you careful, but too much fear makes you weak. Is that why you're not afraid of anything? I'm afraid of plenty. I'm just better at hiding it. Like what? Cole was quiet, staring into the fire. I'm afraid of being alone again. Really alone, the way I was before you came. He said it matter-of-factly, like admitting a practical concern. I'm afraid I'll wake up one day and you'll realize you've made a mistake tying yourself to a broken man in the middle of nowhere. I'm afraid I won't be enough to keep you safe when it matters. The honesty in his voice made Malin's chest ache. I'm not going anywhere, Rowan. You say that now. I say it because it's true. She set down her own bowl and moved closer. I chose this. Not because I had no other options. I could have kept running, found another town, tried again somewhere else. I chose this because being here, with you, feels more real than anything else I've experienced. You don't lie to me. You don't pretend. You just exist, and you let me exist beside you. Do you know how rare that is? It's just basic decency. It's more than that. It's seeing me as human, as equal, as someone whose voice and choices matter. Malin reached out and touched his hand. I've never had that before. Not from my parents, who loved me but saw me as something to protect and control. Not from the town, who saw me as a problem to remove. But you argue with me, teach me, get frustrated when I don't listen, and trust me to pull my own weight. That's not basic decency. That's respect. Cole looked down at her hand on his, then up at her face. You make it sound like I'm doing something extraordinary. You are. You just don't realize it because it comes natural to you. Anna said something similar once, that I treated her like a person instead of a prize to win or a decoration to display. His voice roughened. She said it was one of the reasons she loved me. The word hung between them. Love. Neither of them had used it before, not in relation to each other. It felt too big, too complicated for what they'd built from necessity and survival. But Malin didn't pull her hand away, and Cole didn't pull his away either. I don't know if I can love again, he said quietly. Anna's death broke something in me. I don't know if it can be fixed. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm not asking for love. What are you asking for? Malin thought about it, trying to articulate feelings she barely understood herself. I'm asking to matter, to be seen and valued and trusted. I'm asking for partnership, for honesty, for the space to become whoever I'm supposed to be without judgment. If that eventually becomes love, then fine. If it doesn't, that's fine too. But right now, what we have, this respect, this partnership, it's enough. Cole studied her face for a long moment, then slowly turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. It was the first deliberately intimate gesture he'd made, and it sent warmth through Malin's entire body. You're a remarkable woman, Malin. I'm just trying to survive, same as you. No, you're doing more than that. You're actually living. He squeezed her hand gently. You reminded me that those are different things. They sat like that for a long time, hands intertwined, watching the fire burn down to embers. It wasn't romantic in the conventional sense. There was no declaration of love, no passionate embrace. But it was intimate in a deeper way, the kind of intimacy that came from two damaged people choosing to trust each other with their broken pieces. When the fire grew too low to provide warmth, they separated to prepare for sleep. But that night, for the first time, Malin didn't unroll her bedding by the fire. She looked at Cole, a question in her eyes. He understood without words being spoken. He pulled back the furs on his bed and moved to one side, making space. Malin climbed in beside him, maintaining a respectful distance but sharing the same warmth. They lay in the darkness, not touching but aware of each other's presence. Good night, Rowan. Good night, Malin. She fell asleep listening to his breathing, feeling safer than she had in years. March came with the first signs of spring, patches of bare ground where the snow melted, birds returning to the high country, the air losing some of its bitter edge. Malin had survived her first mountain winter, and the achievement felt significant. She and Cole worked together to prepare for the coming months, repairing damage from winter storms, planning the garden Malin wanted to plant, organizing the furs Cole would eventually need to sell. They moved around each other with practiced ease now, their partnership solidified through months of shared work and quiet evenings. Cole still had his dark moods, days when grief sat heavy on him and he could barely speak. But Mei Lin had learned to navigate those times, giving him space without abandoning him, letting him return to himself in his own time. And Cole had learned to read Mei Lin's silences too, knowing when she was thinking about her parents, when the isolation of the mountains felt too heavy, when she needed reassurance that she hadn't made a mistake. They didn't talk about feelings often. Both of them were too practical, too focused on survival to indulge in romantic declarations. But actions spoke louder anyway. The way Cole made sure Mei Lin's coffee was ready when she woke. The way Mei Lin mended his clothes with careful stitches. The way they instinctively moved to protect each other when danger threatened. One afternoon in late March, as they worked together to repair the cabin's roof, Cole paused and looked down at Mei Lin. "What?" she asked, noticing his gaze. "Nothing. Just thinking." "About what?" "About how this arrangement has worked out better than I expected." Mei Lin smiled. That almost sounded like a compliment. "It was a compliment. Take it before I change my mind." She laughed, the sound bright in the spring air. Cole's expression softened watching her, something warming in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "What?" Mei Lin asked, catching his look. "You laugh now. You didn't when you first came here." "I didn't have much to laugh about." "And now you do?" "Sometimes. When you make terrible jokes while teaching me to shoot. When you burn dinner and pretend you did it on purpose. When you argue with Daisy like she's a person who can understand your complaints." Mei Lin climbed higher on the ladder to reach the next section of roof. "You give me reasons to laugh without trying to. I think that counts for something. Anna used to say the same thing, that I was funnier than I realized." He said his wife's name easily now, without the sharp edge of pain it used to carry. Mei Lin took that as a sign of healing, or at least acceptance. "Tell me something about her I don't know," Mei Lin said. "Something good." Cole was quiet while he worked, considering. "She couldn't whistle. Tried her whole life, never managed it. Used to get so frustrated watching me whistle while working. She'd practice for hours, just ending up spitting everywhere." Mei Lin could picture it, a refined woman from Philadelphia determined to master such a simple thing. Did she ever learn? No, but she never stopped trying. That was Anna, stubborn about the strangest things. They finished the roof repair as the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Standing on the ground, surveying their work, Mei Lin felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was her home. She'd helped build it, maintain it, defend it. It belonged to her as much as to Rowan now. That night, they shared the bed as they had for the past month. The arrangement so natural now that neither questioned it. But something was different. Mei Lin could feel it in the air between them, a tension that wasn't uncomfortable but wasn't quite simple either. Cole seemed to feel it too. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, his breathing not quite settled into sleep. "Rowan?" Mei Lin said quietly. "Yeah?" "Are you happy with how things have turned out?" He turned his head to look at her in the darkness. "Happy is a complicated word. But content?" "Yes. More content than I've been in 5 years. That's enough for me too." "Is it? Really?" He shifted onto his side, facing her. "You're young, Mei Lin. You could have a real marriage someday with someone who loves you the way you deserve. Children, a normal life. I don't want normal. Normal is what the people in Red Pine Crossing have. Rigid rules, shallow judgments, fear of anything different. I'd rather have this. Real partnership with someone who sees me clearly." Even if it never becomes love? Mei Lin considered the question honestly. "I think it already is love, just not the kind people write poems about. It's the practical kind, the kind built from respect and trust and choosing each other every day. That feels more valuable than passion that burns hot and fades." Cole reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he cupped her face gently, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "You're wiser than your years." "I've had to grow up fast. So did I once. Then I spent 5 years trying to stop being human entirely. You reminded me I couldn't." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Thank you for that." Mei Lin covered his hand with hers. "Thank you for giving me a place to belong." They stayed like that, the intimacy of the moment not requiring anything more. No desperate kisses, no passionate declarations. Just two people acknowledging what they'd built together, a fragile, valuable thing neither had expected to find. Eventually they fell asleep, Cole's hand still gentle against Mei Lin's face, her hand still covering his. Outside, the mountain wind whispered through the pines, and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. Inside the cabin, two broken people slept peacefully, their survival transforming slowly into something that looked like home. Spring came fully to the mountains in April, transforming the world from white silence to green chaos. Water rushed down every slope as snowmelt swelled the creeks. Wildflowers exploded across the meadows in riots of color. The air smelled like pine and wet earth and possibility. Mei Lin planted the garden she'd been planning all winter, her hands deep in soil that was finally warm enough to work. Cole had helped her clear a space and build raised beds from split logs, though he'd grumbled the entire time about how much easier it was to just buy vegetables from the valley. "Not if nobody in the valley will sell to us," Mei Lin pointed out, pressing seeds into the dark earth with careful precision. "Fair point." He leaned on the shovel, watching her work. "You know what you're doing with those?" "My mother had a garden in San Francisco. I helped her sometimes." The memory was bittersweet but no longer painful. Time and distance had softened the edges. She grew Chinese vegetables mostly, things she missed from home, but the basics are the same. "What are you planting?" "Beans, squash, some herbs, potatoes if they'll grow at this elevation." She sat back on her heels, surveying the neat rows. "It won't be much the first year, but it's a start." Cole nodded, then did something unexpected. He knelt beside her and started helping, following her instructions on spacing and depth. They worked in comfortable silence, their movements synchronized from months of partnership. When they finished, Mei Lin's back ached and her hands were filthy, but she felt deeply satisfied. This garden was proof of permanence, of believing in a future here. You didn't plant seeds unless you planned to be around for the harvest. That night, washing dishes after dinner, Mei Lin caught Cole watching her with an expression she'd seen more frequently lately. Soft, contemplative, almost tender. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Just thinking you look happy." "I am happy. Is that strange?" "A little, given everything." Mei Lin dried her hands and turned to face him. "I was thinking about that today, actually. About how I ended up here, in the middle of nowhere, married to a man I barely knew 6 months ago. If someone had told me this would be my life, I would have thought it sounded like a punishment. And now it feels like the opposite. Like everything that happened, losing my parents, the town rejecting me, even Sheriff Morton's threats, all of it pushed me toward something better than what I had before." She moved closer to where Cole sat at the table. "I don't think I was ever really happy in San Francisco. I was comfortable, protected, but not happy. I was living the life my parents wanted, wearing the face society expected. Here, I'm just myself. And that's enough." Cole reached out and pulled her gently onto his lap, an intimacy that had become natural between them over the past weeks. "You're more than enough, Mei Lin. He struggled for words. "You're the reason I remember what it feels like to be alive instead of just existing." Mei Lin cupped his face in her hands, feeling the roughness of his beard, seeing the warmth in his blue eyes that had been ice cold when they first met. "When did this happen?" "When did what happen?" "When did we stop being two people surviving together and become this?" Cole's hands settled on her waist, holding her steady. "I don't know. Somewhere between you showing up half dead from exhaustion and you planting a garden like you plan to stay forever. Somewhere in all those quiet evenings and hard mornings and moments when you made me laugh without trying." He paused. "Does it matter when?" "No, I guess it doesn't." She kissed him then. Not their first kiss, but the first one that felt like a beginning instead of an experiment. Cole responded carefully at first, then with growing certainty, his arms tightening around her. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, Mei Lin rested her forehead against his. "I love you," she said quietly. "I don't know when it started either, but it's true. I love you, Rowan Cole, with all your broken pieces and sharp edges and stubborn silences." Cole's eyes were bright with emotion. "I love you too. I didn't think I could again, but you—" His voice roughened. "You made me want to try. Made me believe I had something left worth giving. You have everything worth giving." That night, they made love for the first time, slow and careful and real. It wasn't perfect. Nothing in their lives had been perfect, but it was honest and intimate and full of the trust they'd built through months of choosing each other. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Cole traced patterns on Mei Lin's bare shoulder. "I need to tell you something," he said. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just important." He took a breath. "I'm never going to be easy to love. I'll have days when the grief comes back hard and I can't talk or touch or do anything but exist. I'll say the wrong thing sometimes because I don't know how to be gentle. I'll probably drive you crazy with how stubborn I am. I know all that already. But I need you to know that even on those days, even when I'm at my worst, I'm choosing you. Choosing this. Choosing us." His hand found hers in the darkness. "You're not a replacement for what I lost. You're something entirely new, something I didn't know I needed until you walked into my clearing looking terrified and determined and completely out of place." Mei Lin turned to face him. "And you need to know that I'm going to be difficult too. I'll push when I should pull back. I'll want to talk when you need silence. I'll make mistakes because I'm still learning how to be someone's partner." She kissed him softly. "But I'm choosing this too. Every day, I'm choosing you." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time since Anna died, Cole slept through the entire night without nightmares. The next few weeks passed in a haze of work and spring warmth and the slow deepening of their connection. Mei Lin's garden began to sprout tiny green shoots. Cole's trap lines produced well as animals emerged from winter dens. They worked together, ate together, shared the same bed and the same dreams. But peace never lasted long in their world. The trouble came on a Tuesday morning in early May. Cole had gone to check the high trap line, leaving Mei Lin alone at the cabin for the day. She was weeding the garden when she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. Too many. Mei Lin grabbed the rifle she now kept close and moved to where she could see the trail. Her stomach dropped when she recognized the riders, Sheriff Morton, 4 deputies, and Mrs. Patterson herself, looking triumphant and vindictive. They stopped at the edge of the clearing. Morton dismounted slowly, his hand resting on his gun. "Mrs. Cole," he called out, the title dripping with sarcasm. "We need to have a conversation." "My husband isn't here." "We know. We waited until he left." Morton walked closer, forcing Mei Lin to either retreat or stand her ground. She stood. "We've got new information. Seems your marriage might not be as legal as you thought." Mei Lin's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "Our marriage is completely legal." "Is it?" "Because we did some investigating, talked to Magistrate Hutchins. Turns out he never filed your marriage certificate with the territorial office. Without proper filing, the marriage isn't legally recognized." "That's a lie." Mrs. Patterson spoke up, her voice sharp with satisfaction. "It's the truth. We have documentation. Your so-called marriage is invalid, which means you're still in violation of multiple ordinances. We're here to take you into custody." "You're not taking me anywhere." "We can do this easy or hard, girl. Your choice." Morton gestured to his deputies, who began to spread out, circling. Mei Lin raised the rifle, her hands surprisingly steady despite her fear. "The first person who touches me gets shot. I'm a decent shot now, and at this range I won't miss. You willing to kill a lawman over this?" "I'm willing to defend my home and my rights. What you're doing is illegal. You have no authority here." "I have all the authority I need." Morton took another step forward. Mei Lin cocked the rifle, the sound sharp in the morning air. "Don't." They faced off across the clearing, tension thick enough to choke on. Morton's hand hovered near his gun, and Mei Lin knew with absolute certainty that he was looking for an excuse to draw. If she fired first, he'd call it justification. If she didn't fire, he'd overpower her and drag her back to town. There was no winning scenario here. The shot that rang out didn't come from Mei Lin's rifle. It came from the trees behind Morton, and it kicked up dirt 2 inches from the sheriff's boot. Every head swiveled to see Cole emerging from the forest, his rifle still raised, his face carved from stone and fury. "Next one goes through your leg," he said calmly. "One after that goes through your chest. Your choice, Morton." "Cole, we're just enforcing the law. You're trespassing on private property, threatening my wife, and spreading lies about legal documents." Cole moved into the clearing, positioning himself between Morton and Mei Lin. "I checked with Hutchins 2 weeks ago. Our marriage is filed and legal. Whatever documentation you think you have is forged." Mrs. Patterson's face flushed. You can't prove that. Actually, I can, because I've got friends in the territorial office who confirmed everything. Want me to ride down there with you right now and show you the records? Cole's voice was deadly quiet. Or do you want to admit this was just another attempt to harass my wife because you can't stand that she exists outside your control? Morton's jaw worked, fury and frustration warring on his face. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Cole lowered his rifle but kept it ready. Because if you come here again, any of you, I'll file charges for harassment, trespassing, and attempted assault. I've got witnesses to everything that's happened. Mrs. Willis, the McGraw brothers, even some folks in Copper Falls who are sick of Red Pine Crossing's self-righteous bullying. You'd take the word of a Chinese woman over mine. I'd take the word of my wife over anyone. Cole stepped forward, forcing Morton to step back. Now get off my land before I forget I'm trying to be civilized about this. For a long moment, it could have gone either way. Morton's hand twitched toward his gun. The deputies looked uncertain. Mrs. Patterson's expression was venomous. Then one of the younger deputies spoke up. Sheriff, maybe we should go. This doesn't feel right. Another deputy nodded. Agreed. If the marriage is legal, we got no grounds here. Morton glared at his men, but he could see he'd lost their support. Slowly, he remounted his horse. You're making a mistake protecting her, Cole. She'll bring you nothing but trouble. She's brought me everything worth having. Cole's voice was firm. Now leave. They rode off, and this time Mei Lin could feel the finality in their departure. Morton's face had shown defeat, not just frustration. He'd played his last card and lost. When they were gone, Cole turned to Mei Lin. She was shaking now, the adrenaline catching up with her. You okay? He asked. You came back. How did you know? I saw their tracks on the trail, turned around immediately. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I thought I might be too late. I was about to shoot him. I know, I could see it. He pulled back to look at her face. You would have done it too, wouldn't you? Actually pulled the trigger. To protect our home? Yes, without hesitation. Cole's expression was a mix of pride and concern. You've changed so much from that scared woman who showed up here last fall. I had to. This world doesn't let you stay soft. No, it doesn't. He kissed her forehead. But you're still you underneath all that armor. That's what matters. They stood in the clearing for a long time, holding each other while the fear and anger slowly drained away. When they finally separated, Mei Lin noticed something. You called me your wife, not for show, not for the law. You meant it. Of course I meant it. You are my wife. Cole took her hand. And I need you to understand something. When I stood between you and Morton just now, when I threatened to shoot a lawman to protect you, that wasn't strategy or legal maneuvering. That was me choosing your life over everything else, over my safety, my freedom, even my own life if it came to that. Rowan, no, listen. I love you, Mei Lin. Fully, completely, in ways I didn't think I could anymore. And I will protect you with everything I have for as long as I'm breathing. That's not a promise. It's just fact. Mei Lin felt tears sliding down her face. I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. Good. Fear means it matters, means we've got something worth protecting. He wiped away her tears with his thumbs. Now come on, let's check on that garden you're so proud of. Make sure Morton's horses didn't trample anything. They walked to the garden hand in hand, and Mei Lin was relieved to see her seedlings were unharmed. The tiny green shoots were still there, still growing, still reaching toward the sun. Life continued, the garden grew, the weeks passed, and gradually, word filtered down from Red Pine Crossing that things were changing. It started with the Willis family mentioning casually to the McGraw brothers that they'd bought supplies from a Chinese woman in town. Mei Lin's uncle had finally hired help, a young woman from the mining camp who was competent and hardworking. People started shopping there again, finding they'd missed the fair prices and good inventory. Then one of the deputies who'd accompanied Morton on that final confrontation apparently told the real story in the saloon one night, how the sheriff had forged documents and tried to force an illegal arrest, how Cole had been in the right, how the whole thing had been about hatred rather than justice. The story spread. People started questioning Mrs. Patterson's crusade. The town council quietly distanced themselves from Morton's actions. By June, when Cole and Mei Lin made their first trip together down to Copper Falls for supplies, they heard that Sheriff Morton had resigned under pressure and left Red Pine Crossing entirely. Mrs. Patterson had lost much of her influence, her moral authority undermined by the revelation that she'd been part of a scheme to forge legal documents. "The town's pretending it never happened," Cole said as they rode back toward the mountains with their supplies. "Acting like they weren't all complicit in trying to destroy you." "Let them pretend," Maylin said. "I don't need their apology or their acceptance. I've got everything I need." Cole smiled at her, and it transformed his face from hard to almost gentle. "That's my girl, sharp as ever." "Your girl? I'm your wife. Can't you be both?" "I suppose I can." Summer in the mountains was brief but glorious. Maylin's garden exploded with growth, producing more vegetables than two people could eat. They preserved what they could, and Maylin started trading excess produce with the Willis family and the McGraws for other goods. Cole's fur sales in Copper Falls brought in good money, and he used some of it to buy Maylin fabric for new dresses, books she'd mentioned wanting to read, small luxuries that made her face light up with surprised pleasure. "You don't have to buy me things," she said, after he presented her with a beautiful set of gardening tools. "I know. I want to." He watched her examine the tools with obvious delight. "You never ask for anything. It's nice to surprise you sometimes." "I don't need things to be happy." "I know that too, but you deserve them anyway." They were building a life, brick by brick, day by day. Not the life either of them had imagined. It was harder, lonelier, more isolated than most people would choose. But it was theirs, built on honesty and respect, and the kind of love that came from truly seeing each other. In August, Maylin's uncle made the journey up to the cabin. It was the first time he'd visited, and he looked uncomfortable the entire trip, clearly out of his element in the wilderness. Cole greeted him politely, but without warmth. They sat outside while Maylin made tea, the two men sizing each other up in silence. "I came to apologize," Chen finally said. "Little late for that," Cole replied. "I know, but I need to say it anyway." He looked at Maylin when she brought out the tea. "I was wrong. I was a coward. I should have protected you from the beginning instead of worrying about my business and my reputation." Maylin sat down beside Cole. "You were trying to survive, Uncle. I understand that. Understanding isn't the same as forgiving." "No, but I'm working on both." She poured tea with steady hands. "Why come now? Why not 6 months ago when it might have mattered?" Chen looked ashamed. "Because I was still afraid then. Afraid of what the town would think, what it would cost me. But I've been watching what's happened. Morton leaving, Mrs. Patterson losing her power, people starting to see that their hatred was based on lies." He met Maylin's eyes. "And I've been watching you. Reports come back from the Willis family, from travelers who pass through here. They say you're thriving, that you and Cole have built something real." "We have," Maylin said simply. "I wanted to see for myself, and to tell you that I'm proud of you. You survived what should have destroyed you. You found strength I didn't know you had." He glanced around the cabin, the garden, the evidence of hard work and careful planning. "You've built a life worth living. That takes courage I never had." Cole spoke up, his voice less harsh than before. "Courage is easier when you've got nothing left to lose." Maylin didn't choose to be brave. She was forced into it. Maybe, but she chose how to respond. She could have broken. Instead, she bent and became stronger. Chen looked at Cole. "And you helped her, protected her when no one else would. I owe you a debt I can never repay." "You don't owe me anything. I did what any decent person would do." "But most people aren't decent, that's what I've learned." Chen finished his tea and stood. "I should go before dark. But I wanted you to know, both of you, that you're welcome in Red Pine Crossing now. The town has changed, not completely, not perfectly, but enough. If you ever want to visit—" "We don't," Cole said flatly. Chen nodded, understanding. "I figured, but the offer stands." After he left, Maylin and Cole sat in silence for a while, watching the sun paint the mountains in gold and crimson. "Do you wish things had been different?" Cole asked. "That your uncle had protected you from the start? That the town had accepted you?" Maylin thought about it honestly. "Sometimes, but mostly no. If things had been different, I would have stayed in Red Pine Crossing, worked in my uncle's shop, lived a safe small life, never known what I was capable of, never met you. You think meeting me was worth all the rest of it?" "Meeting you, marrying you, building this life. It was worth everything." She leaned against him. I was a decoration in San Francisco, a problem in Red Pine Crossing. Here, I'm just Mei Lin. Your wife, your partner, myself. That's worth more than safety or acceptance or any of the things I thought I needed. Cole wrapped his arm around her shoulders. You know what Anna used to say? That the best things in life come from the worst circumstances. I never understood what she meant until you showed up half frozen and desperate, and I realized I'd been given a second chance I didn't deserve. We both got second chances. We were both broken, and somehow we put each other back together. Not all the way. We're still pretty broken. Maybe. But broken together is better than whole apart. They watched the sunset in comfortable silence, and Mei Lin thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fire that took her parents. The town that rejected her. The desperate mountain climb. The man who'd seen past her foreignness to the person underneath. It hadn't been a fairy tale. There'd been no magic, no divine intervention, no neat moral to the story. Just two damaged people choosing each other over and over again, building something real from the ruins of their previous lives. That night, lying in bed with Cole's arms around her, Mei Lin spoke into the darkness. Rowan? Thank you. For what? For being you. For not trying to save me or fix me or turn me into something else. For just seeing me and deciding I was worth the trouble. Cole kissed her temple. You were never trouble, Mei Lin. You were the answer to a question I didn't know I was asking. What question? How to live instead of just survive. How to let someone in without being destroyed. How to love again after you think you've used up all your love. He held her closer. You showed me all that. We showed each other. Yeah, I guess we did. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other in the cabin they'd built into a home, in the mountains that had become their sanctuary. The next morning, Mei Lin woke early and went outside to watch the sunrise. The world was painted in shades of pink and gold, the mountains standing eternal and indifferent to human drama. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, scared, alone, desperate for acceptance from people who would never give it, and she thought about who she'd become, strong, capable, loved, not despite her differences, but including them. The journey had been brutal. She'd lost everything, been rejected by everyone, forced to fight for every scrap of dignity and survival. But standing here now, watching dawn break over the mountains she called home, Mei Lin couldn't bring herself to regret any of it. Because the truth was, she'd been living someone else's life before. Following someone else's rules, seeking someone else's approval. Here, in this harsh, beautiful place, with this difficult, gentle man, she was finally just herself. And herself was enough. Cole emerged from the cabin, sleep-rumpled and squinting in the bright morning light. He moved to stand beside her, his hand finding hers automatically. What are you thinking about? He asked. How far I've come. How different everything is. Better or worse? Different, but mine. She squeezed his hand. Ours. They stood together watching the sun climb higher, two survivors who'd found each other in the wilderness and built something that looked like love, felt like home, and was entirely their own. The world would keep turning. Red Pine Crossing would continue its small-town dramas. Winter would come again, harsh and unforgiving. Life would bring new challenges, new struggles, new moments of doubt. But Mei Lin wasn't afraid anymore. She'd learned that she could survive anything. And more than that, she'd learned that survival wasn't enough. You had to find reasons to live, not just exist. You had to build something worth protecting, even if it looked nothing like what you'd planned. She'd found that the most unlikely place with the most unlikely person. A mountain man with a broken heart and a gift for seeing past surfaces to truth. A man who'd lost everything and somehow found the courage to risk it all again. They weren't perfect. Their love wasn't perfect. But it was real and honest and built on the only foundation that mattered, choosing each other when the world gave them every reason not to. Come on, Cole said, tugging her hand gently. We've got work to do. That fence on the east side needs fixing before winter. It's only August. Winter comes fast in the mountains. You know that now. Mei Lin followed him back toward the cabin, toward their life, toward the future they were building one day at a time. Behind them, the sun continued its climb, indifferent and eternal, lighting a world that had tried to break them both and failed. Because sometimes the greatest strength isn't in never breaking. It's in putting yourself back together afterward, in finding someone who sees all your cracks and sharp edges and chooses to stay anyway, in building a life from ruins and calling it home. Maylin had been the beautiful outsider, unwanted and rejected. Now she was simply herself, Maylin Cole, wife and partner and survivor, living a life that belonged to no one but her. And that was worth more than all the acceptance in the world.